Good afternoon, and welcome to the operational budget meeting for 2022-2023 budget year. This afternoon, the Director of Finance, Deborah Kroll, will present the draft operational budget. The expectation is that Council will provide direction at the end of the meeting to staff with regards to the disposition of the draft budget. Members of Council were provided with copies of the operational budget on April 6th for review prior to this meeting. During the presentation, members of Council are encouraged to ask questions directly to the Finance Director for clarification of budget and Department Directors for clarification of details. The meeting is being conducted in Council chambers and is being live streamed on Facebook Live. This meeting is called to order. I note that all members of Council are present and we have quorum. The Director has provided us with a proposed agenda. There is one matter on this agenda, and that is the operational budget. I would accept a motion to accept the proposed agenda, please. Councillor York, thank you. Councillor Zabian for the second, thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. All right, Director, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and good evening to council members and members of the directors. Glad to have you here, and it's my pleasure to present to you the draft one of the Town of Kentville operating budget for the year 22-23 for your discussion and hopefully deliberation, and we'll have some decisions at the end of this presentation. So the agenda for this evening is, firstly, we're going to look at some budget drivers and some general information related to the Town of Kentville and our assessment services this year. We're going to then look at the departmental budgets, budget by budget, and department by department, and then we're going to look at the revenue streams that will balance this budget. We'll look at the tax rates, the proposed tax rates for residential and commercial, and then, of course, at the very end, we'll ask for your discussion and direction to us as to what you think of this budget document we're putting before you. So the first thing we're going to get into are the budget drivers. And the first thing we're going to look at is the capped assessment for 22. And just for comparison purposes, we're going to look at a little bit for last year, 2021. The cap rate was set at 0.3%. In total, capped last year was 21.5 million, and revenue lost at the residential and resource rate for that particular fiscal year was around $303,000. The number of accounts capped last year was 1645 of 2015 dwelling units, so we were at about 68.2% capped. For 2022, it's a whole different picture. We're looking at the cap rate set at 5.4%. We're looking at residential cap at 31.2 million, resource at $127,900. The total cap is $31 million capped. Revenue lost at the municipal rate for 21-22 is around $441,000, and the number of accounts capped this year is 1646, which is only one more than last year, but we have an additional 22 accounts, 2,437 accounts. So we're looking at about 67.5% capped. The cap, just for information, for those who don't know, the cap is based on the CPI for Nova Scotia for the month of October as set by Statistics Canada. And it was originally instigated in 2005 by the province to prevent sudden and dramatic increases in the assessed value of property in Nova Scotia. And originally it was set at 10%, but in 2007, it was changed from 10% to a fluctuating rate based on CPI. The province feels that the cap maintains stability, predictability, and affordability for taxpayers. However, municipal governments don't necessarily agree with that philosophy. So we're looking now at the assessment breakdown, and this is from the filed roll. This is a snapshot that comes in at the roll delivered on January the 1. There's no allowances for losses or adjustments in this. And you can see that Kentville remains fairly stable. Our residential stays at between 82 and 83%. The last 2 years, it's been 83% of our roll. The commercial is stable at 11% for the last 2 years. And the Kentville Business Park, which is rated separately, stands at 6%. So that's basically how our roll looks when the roll comes in. But there are adjustments that have to be made for allowances for losses. So the taxable assessments, this is what we tax on each year. We're looking at the taxable assessment this year moving to $581 million. It's an increase of $48,126,503 or 9%, which is one of the highest increases I've seen, I think, ever in the lift in taxable assessments in Kentville. Residential and resource, the lift is 10.5%, commercial 3.6%, and the province and the federal payments in lieu of tax or grants in lieu of tax is down 8.1% from last year. And you just see the graph there that shows the difference between residential at 451 moving up to 499. Commercial was at 62.7 million, moving up to 65 million. And then you'll see the grants in lieu have moved down from 18.6 million down to 17 million. Just some interesting statistics. Taxable new residential construction this year, 70 new accounts, which afforded us $17.9 million in new assessment dollars. Taxable new new commercial construction, 16, which gave us 1.8 million increase in assessed value. We're looking at the residential ineligible accounts from sales. 109 sales were accounted for last year, which gave us an increased assessed value of 4.9 million. And as you know, when a house is sold in Kentville or anywhere in Nova Scotia, the cap comes off for 1 year and it moves to close to retail. So we achieved $4.9 million extra in assessments from sales of property in Kentville. Dwelling units, living units, we previously were at 3,152, and we're now at 3,251, which is an increase of 99. But there may be more than one living unit per assessment account, so just bear that in mind. But we do have 99 new living units in the town. So those are just some interesting little statistics to see how things have changed in 1 year. It's changed to the good. So we're looking at the revenue that would fall out of this at 21, 22 mill rates, and this is net of the cap and allowance for losses. We're looking at residential and resource. Oops, that's I don't know where we went here. There we go. Residential and resource. The percentage increase, as I mentioned before, was 10.5%. We're looking at new revenue from this at $757,900. Commercial moved up 3.6%. We're looking at $86,700 in new revenue from commercial. The federal and provincial grants in lieu down 8.1%. That's a reduction of $46,100. So the net increase is $798,500. There were changes in the area rates, which are area rates we don't keep. We hand off to other entities, and the economic development rate as well is handed off to another entity. So those were reduced. Those area rates have changed, have reduced greatly from last year. So we are giving less to the area rates of $104,600 and the economic development rate about $1,800. So the net increase in tax revenue, $692,100. And then the change in the special rate, which is the Kentville Business Park, that moved up 6.1%. We're looking at $43,900 in new revenue for the business park. So the total increase in tax revenue, all sources, $736,000, which is one of the highest lift I think I've ever seen in all the years I've done the budgets. So good news, all told. We're very fortunate this year to have that extra money to deal with. So we're looking now at the mandatory expenditures, which are taxes collected and payable to the province of Nova Scotia and property valuation services. We can't escape these charges. We have to add these, piggyback these charges on our tax bills, and this is what it's comprised of. Assessment services, that has moved down in this budget by $800. Corrections has moved upwards of $1,700. Prosecution down slightly, $1,700. Housing has remained the same in this budget at $90,000. And the provincial library transfers to the provincial library, $42,800, no change there. Education has moved up slightly, $12,000, one of the lowest increases actually in education I've seen in many years, $12,000. So all in, we're looking at mandatory expenditures increasing about 0.6% in this budget. The mandatory rate this year is 34 3/4 cents per 100, which is a decrease of about 3 cents from last year. So that gives us actually 3 more cents to operate the town programs and services. So that is what the mandatory expenditures look like. So we're looking at $1.9 million in payments to the province of Nova Scotia for a variety of services. So the next, what we're looking at next is the joint boards payable to our service delivery partners. And this is joint boards that the town is involved in. We have agreements with all of these particular entities, and we have agreed to pay them based on the separate agreements for each one of them. So the joint boards is increasing about 5.9% over last year. We're looking at Kentville Volunteer Fire Department moving up $6,200 to $200,000. It's about a 3.2% increase over last year. The King's Fire Inspection Services and the 911 is the next one that has moved up $7,200 combined. It's based, the King's Fire Inspection is based on a new contract, which is based on the cost of living, while the building inspection service is an estimate or reflective of actual paid in this last fiscal year. The 911 system decreases slightly from the prior year, about $1,100, but it reflects the actual that was paid last year. The REMO program continues. We're partnering with other Valley municipal units to provide regional emergency services to citizens. An intermunicipal agreement which expired in March of 2020. The town is continuing with this program. Our share is about 15%, and we anticipate that the amount that we're going to pay into REMO will remain the same at $11,900. King's Transit is the next item. $17,600 is the increase for King's Transit. It's about a 6.5% increase, but this will be offset by $17,100, which is retained in our operating reserve for the transit, the Safe Restart program for King's Transit, which was sent to us by the province of Nova Scotia last year. We paid half of it to King's Transit we paid some of it to King's Transit last year, and the residual $17,100 will move over, and you'll see that in the operating, on the revenue side of the ledger when we get to the revenue. So we're looking at an increase for King's Transit of $17,600. King's Point to Point is moving downward $2,900 budget to budget. Last year, we had, they did not need a capital acquisition. We did budget for that because we had anticipated it, but they didn't need it, so that is why there's a large decrease in King's Point to Point. Valley Waste has moved up $45,200 to $666,600, and I'll be talking a little bit more about Valley Waste a little bit further on in the budget when we get to that particular segment. Valley Waste our share is 10.23% this year. It's an increase of 7.3%, and this will be totally offset by our reserve. We have a Valley Waste reserve in our operating reserve, and that reserve at the end of March contained $349,200. So we'll be withdrawing the $45,200 and transferring it into our revenue streams in order to offset this increase from Valley Waste. We don't anticipate any changes in King's landfill that transferred to King's for the monitoring of the Meadowview landfill, and we don't anticipate any changes in the Valley Wren charge of $29,000. So we're looking at the total for joint boards, $1.3 million, or a $73,300 increase. The next segment is the commitments. And these commitments are funds committed by council or agreements that the town has made. We have reduced tax as the first one. It's based on last year's actuals. We had quite a reduction in our Section 69s, low income last year, so we have moved that down $3,000 this year. Kentville Police Service Dispatch Services has moved up $3,500, and this is due to the cost of living factor that is built into the Bridgewater agreement for providing that service to Kentville Police Service. Kentville Police Service also is committed to a crisis navigator. They receive funding from the province of Nova Scotia from Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage for a term position April to December 22, which position to focus on supporting programs and initiatives that alleviate the effects of poverty. That money has actually arrived, so that is sitting there waiting for the individual to be hired and continue with that program. Custody services has moved up $10,000, and this is related to the RCMP detachment in New Minas. Its expenditure is based on the number of prisoners that are held, and if we exceed 30% of the total, then there is an extra charge, and we received that extra charge this year, so we have built the safeguard into this budget to ensure that we have the monies there to offset any extra charges made to us by that. Economic development has remained the same. This is the transfer to Kentville Business Community, $113,800. And the Climate Change Action Plan was funds that were committed last year by council on January 25th, 2021. Those funds were not spent last year, so we're bringing them forward this year in anticipation that that program may be continuing this year. There was a grant that was paid out to the Credit Union Recreation Center last year. It was the last year of that particular grant, so that grant has been removed from the budget. And the library lease increases by the cost of living for the CPI for Nova Scotia for the month of February, which was 5.7%. So we're looking at an increase for the library lease of $4,700 in 22-23. And so this moves our commitments up to $437,000, an increase of $45,600. So some other fixed expenses, and these are required by legislation or generally accepted accounting principles. We're looking at debt repayment, moving down very slightly from last year, $300. Allowances are moving down $10,000, and this is the allowance for accrued sick leave. It's decreased by $10,000 due to changes in the staff complement over the last year. Area rates have moved down $5,200, and we have two area rates. We have the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department area rate, which remains stable at 3 3/4 cents. It was approved at the Joint Fire Services meeting and at a ratepayers meeting held on March the 7th. It's based on a formula that's contained in the Joint Fire Services Agreement. The town charges 4% plus HST for piggybacking that tax on our tax levies twice a year. The hydrant area rate is the second rate, and this is payable to the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department. And this is based on a formula provided by the Utility and Review Board. It's moved down from 9 cents last year, approximately 9 cents last year, to about 7 1/5 cents this year. The total decrease in area rates is around 1 4/5 cents. The transfer to the operating reserve has increased $66,200 over last year, as monies now are safeguarded for collective bargaining, which will begin in April 2023 with CUPE and in April 2024 with the Atlantic Police Association. So we're looking at other fixed expenditures, $1.8 million, or an increase of $50,700. The next item that we're looking at is remuneration for the town's full-time employees, the non-bargaining staff, CUPE union, the APA union, and council. We're looking at the increase in remuneration in this budget, moving to the increase is $408,200, or 7.7%. We're looking, I have it all broken down here as to what each particular little segment is. We're looking at a total figure of around $5.8 million in total for remuneration for 22-23. The cost of living afforded to non-bargaining employees was 4.7% according to the town's policy. The APA lift, or the Atlantic Police Association lift, was 3% per their collective agreement, and the CUPE lift was 4.7% per their collective agreement. Benefits changes, of course, are included in here, and these are changes to remittances to Canada Revenue Agency and workers' compensation increases, as well as pension increases. And the PSAB accrual was removed this year, as March 31st, 2023 is a Friday, so we don't have to accrue any wages. Class changes and merit increases are due to employee, or increases that are due to employees for whether their class was changed, as in the policing union, or merit increases as to whether they've achieved a milestone for their work with the town. New positions in this budget include the addition of a new custodian, while one other custodian has moved to part-time, a new police sergeant, which was approved by the police board, a term engineer to assist with the active transportation planning and other engineering duties, and a second junior summer intern for recreation. Staffing changes, which is the last one, it relates to those employees who left the town's employ, and the difference in wages and changes in reallocation of current staff. So we're looking at a $5.8 million payroll for 22-23. So if we look at a summary of fixed expenditures, we're looking at a $14.5 million operating budget in 22-23. Of the $14.5 million, $11.3 million of it is mandatory or fixed that we really can't do anything about. The budget remaining, $3.2 million or 22.1%. We're looking at the lift, the increase this year, $871,000. 55.1% of that increase relates to the remuneration. Fixed expenditures, these other ones, mandatory joint boards commitments and other expenditures total $180,800 at 20.8% and reflect the expenditures that the town cannot escape either by provincial mandate, participation in joint boards, funds committed by council, and debt repayment. So we're looking at debating tonight about $3.2 million. So now we'll move into the operating budget and the departmental budgets. And the first one is the legislative budget. So last year we're looking at $257,000. This year we're looking at $269,000. It's an increase of $12,300 or 4.8%. Remuneration and benefits afforded to town council move up a net of $7,300. And this year we've added interpretation services, which is part of our accessibility program of $5,000 has been added in the hopes of having some interpretation services at our council meetings or our committee of the whole meetings. If anybody has any questions, please stop and ask at the time. So the next section is general administration. General administration has moved up $57,700, or about 4%, to $1.5 million. And we have remuneration benefits and the change in internal allocation, a net of $45,400 for administration. This includes the administrative staff as well as the finance staff. Office expense has moved up $35,500, and information technology is moved up $5,500. Building is down $11,500. We've removed some of our COVID expenditures downwards from $10,000 to $5,000. Assessment services, mandatory fixed cost, has decreased $800. Reduced taxes, we talked about that before, is down $3,000. Debt interest is down $3,400, and valuation allowance is also fixed cost, down $10,000. So we're looking at draft one for general administration at $57,700.
Yeah, sorry. What office expense up 35,000?
My sheet's missing, that I had my cheat sheet, so I don't know. I'll have to open up my budget, just, if you can just wait for 2 seconds. Oh, I'll tell you what it is. It's legal expenditure. I should know that.
Is that high, like what we've allowed for this year compared to other years?
Yes, it's legal and accounting, but we know what the accounting or the audit will cost. There are some outstanding issues that we need to deal with.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
So we're looking at protection, community policing. We're looking at an increase of $275,200 or 11%, $2.8 million budget for community policing this year. We're looking at remuneration and benefits, which includes their overtime, their stat time, and their end time, moves up $213,300. And about $126,000 of that is a new officer that has been approved by the police board. The new officer is going to be a community engagement officer, and they're looking to reestablish the role of Kentville Police in the community as a problem solver, training coordinator. The community engagement is at the core of the Kentville Police Service. This position will formalize roles currently performed at a strategic or an ad hoc basis. This will increase supervisory and training capacity, as well as opportunity for sergeants. The risks of not implementing this role: the Kentville Police will not meet community needs and expectations in a formal and long-standing manner. Training costs will continue to rise and training plans will be limited. It provides the ability to develop next-level leaders, and that will mean leadership will be imported versus grown. Cost of new officer is approximately $126,000, and that's including the benefits. So that's just a little snapshot of that new position being added to the budget. We're looking at the office expenses and uniforms moving up $8,100. Insurance in this department has moved up $3,100, and miscellaneous office expenses has moved up $5,000. Under communications and IT, it's moved up $8,000. Bridgewater services increased by 4% annually, so it's moved up $3,500. And IT increases by $4,500. The IT specialist plans to purchase tough books for vehicles and includes subscription renewals and replacement of workstations for the police service. Programs are up $45,400. $35,400 relates to a special program, which is the Community Crisis Navigator Project, which will run from April to December 2022. The term position is offset by funding from the province of Community, Cultures, Tourism, and Housing, and that will be shown in conditional transfers when we look at the revenue side of the ledger, and those funds have already been received by the town. $10,000 of that $45,400 relates to custody and detention of prisoners. That's increased by $10,000. As I said before, if Kentville exceeds 30% of the prisoners, there's a premium to be paid according to the contract with the RCMP. We were billed this unexpectedly in 21-22, and we're going to err on the side of caution and make sure we have that there. The next segment is protection sales of services, and this is the sales of services by back check. We're looking at the account, the section moving up $18,600 or 12.2% to $171,600. And it is all remuneration and benefits, $18,600. The next segment is protection law enforcement. We're looking at this moving up $9,100 to $205,600. We're looking at corrections increasing very slightly, $1,700, which was reflective of the actual this year. Prosecution moved down $1,700, which is a reflection of the actual last year. Legal, there was no change in the legal for law enforcement. Remuneration and benefits moves up $8,100, and this is the remuneration of the 2 crossing guards and the bylaw officer. And miscellaneous expenses for the bylaw officer have moved up $1,000. So we're looking at all in $9,100 for law enforcement. Protection, fire protection. We're looking at protection for fire protection moving up very slightly, $1,000 to $861,100. The transfer to Kentville Volunteer Operating is moved up $6,200. That was approved at a joint fire services meeting earlier this year. It's split between the town of Kentville and the county of Kings based on a 3-year rolling average of kilometers traveled and the number of calls in each municipal unit. The town's portion is approximately 30.8%, with the county's portion 69.2%. The area rate, Kentville Volunteer Fire Department area rate, is transferred to the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department. It was approved by the Joint Fire Services Committee and then at a ratepayer meeting held by the Fire Department on March the 7th, 2022. The rate is up very, very slightly. It moved from 0.0377 per 100 to 0.0378 per 103 3/4 cents. It's based on the assessments in the Kentville Fire District. All of Kentville is contained in that fire district, and the County of Kings sends us the assessments related to the county homes that fall within the Kentville Fire District. Both municipal units charge a 4% administrative fee plus HST on providing the billing and collecting services for Kentville Volunteer Fire Department. The hydrant area rate for Kentville Water Commission has moved down $23,700 from last year, and this is mandated by the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. It's based on the number of hydrants in each municipal unit and a formula provided in the last rate decision of the Kentville Water Utility. The number of hydrants at the last count was Kentville 276, or 68.6%, and County of Kings 125, or 31.2%, which is around 401 in total. And it's related to the cost of having an oversized system in order to provide adequate water flow for fighting fires. Protection emergency measures other, and that moves up $11,900 or 8.8% to $147,400. Debt interest is down slightly, $800, as the long-term debt related to protective services is declining. EMO communications moves up slightly at $500. 911 system, which is part of the joint boards, moves down $1,100, and that just reflection of the actual for last year for Valley Communications and County of Kings maintenance. Occupational health and safety has moved up $5,000, and this is due to occupational health and safety assessments done in the town, or will be done in the town, and also training in that area. Building inspection moves up $6,200, and this is a service provided by the County of Kings to the town of Kentville, and fire inspection moves up $2,100. And it's based on a new agreement that was signed in December 2020, and it expires in 2025. It increases by the CPI for Nova Scotia for the month of December, and at that time it was 4.8%.
I don't have a very clear idea of what we're doing for occupational health and safety.
Well, I'm not party to the occupational health and safety details. Maybe one of the other directors, I think Dave is on that committee.
I am. I'm co-chair with Jennifer. Actually, she's
Oh.
been more the chair
Oh.
as of late. But we, all the, there's representation on that committee from both managerial and staff and everyone, every department, police, public works, recreation, and in town hall, we all have an operational health and safety manual, and setting up now, bringing that manual back up to date. We had several inspections done by a third party here in the last 6 months to, it's a committee that's been a little bit behind, I guess, for a bit, and done some internal inspections. Should I be at the mic?
Director Bell, can I get you to go to the
Certainly,
mic,
sorry.
please? Thank you.
Getting a mumble, am I? Yeah. Sorry, I don't even know what I said. I should have let Jennifer talk. So the OHS committee meets monthly, and that's certainly not not a cost, but it's represented by staff both in the managerial role and workers both in Parks and Rec and Public Works, and custodial staff here are on it, but it's certainly all about our operational health and safety, occupational health and safety rather. We've had an external safety officer, not officer, but it's his profession, to help us bring our policy and manual up to date and get our regular inspections back on track, just to make sure we're compliant in all things, keeping our staff and workers safe.
Well, where do we spend the $5,000?
That's an additional $5, correct?
Yes.
Director Kroll? Yeah. So there is a line item, of course, in there on a budget, but especially with this external company that we've had bring our committee up to date and our manual and our inspections, we've spent that, and more this year,
Yes, it was overexpended this year,
overexpended for sure.
significantly.
Yeah.
Yes.
His fees, but it's a necessary thing and not necessarily an ongoing thing. He's going to help us and train us. We've had some internal training and many inspections of all our facilities to get us up to snuff, as you say. But most of that's where the money would be. Councillor Maxwell.
Great,
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on then to another department. We're going to move into transportation services. And the first section of this is common services. We're looking at this particular segment, moving up $157,300 or 15.5% to $1.2 million. Remuneration and benefits and change in internal allocation affords this budget $118,300 increase. We're looking at office, moving up $2,600, and it was an increase in insurance. Building has moved up $18,300. We're looking at $1,800 for insurance. Propane heating is the big kicker in this particular segment. It's moved up $15,400. Electricity has moved up a very small amount, $100, and supplies has moved up $1,000. Under vehicle, we're looking at an increase of $18,100. We have reallocation of mechanics' wages to this segment at $3,000. Insurance for vehicles moved up $1,000. We have fuel moving up $5,000. External equipment repairs and equipment parts and equipment supplies, which is basically repairs and maintenance on equipment in 3 different accounts, moving up in all total $15,000 from last year. The winter of 2021-22 was really harsh, and it played havoc on our vehicles, and they're getting older, and we're replacing them as we can afford, but certainly the fact that they're rolling through snow and ice as much as they have been causes the need, or has made the need for repairs and maintenance higher. So we overexpended those accounts last year, so we've increased those budget lines in order to hopefully offset some increases this year. So we're looking at a total increase of common services, $157,300. Under road transport, we're looking at a change of $11,500 or 1.5%. And we're looking at a small increase for street repairs, $5,000, and it closely approximates the actual for 21-22. Street cleaning, the same thing, moving up $4,000 to closely approximate the actual for 21-22. There's no change in the snow removal budget for this year. We're leaving it as it was. We did exceed the budget last year, $37,000, at least $37,000. There still are some more costs that need to be charged off to that account. They haven't arrived yet. We had spent about 65% of the snow removal budget in 2021, and we spent 81% of the snow removal budget in 1920. So it's kind of up and down, up and down. You just don't know where to put that moving target. So we've left it as it was. This past year, the acquisition of road salt played in quite a significant increase in our snow removal budget. That has been removed, or that should be removed with our purchases in the winter as things have gone back to normal with road salt. So we're kind of gambling a little bit here that we're not going to have any more snow than we typically have had over the past 2 or 3 years, not including this one. So council needs to know that we have $50,000 in our operating reserve segregated for snow removal, which would help if that would basically pay for one really large snowstorm if we needed to withdraw those funds in order to keep our budget balanced at the end of the year. So we do have some safeguards tucked away. Traffic services and parking services have moved up $2,500. Street signs have increased by $2,000, and these are mostly replacements. And miscellaneous has moved up in that particular segment for safety supplies by $500, and this is related to first aid, safety glasses and gloves and HEP shots, that type of thing for the crew. Under transportation, public transit and other, we're looking at this moving up $15,200 to 3.5%. We're looking at King's Transit, which is part of our joint boards, moving up $17,600. As I mentioned before, we have $17,100 of that coming back from a reserve to offset that particular, or offset almost all of that particular increase in the budget for King's Transit. Kings Point to Point has moved down $2,900, and I spoke about that earlier because that is one of our joint boards. And debt interest, which is a fixed cost, has moved up very slightly, and public transit has moved up $500. All in, we're looking at $15,200 for public transit and other. So we're moving on next to environmental health. And this budget has moved up $45,200, or 6.8%, to $709,200. And this is purely related to Valley Region Solid Waste Management Authority, which has moved its cost to us up by $45,200. This entire amount will be funded from the Valley Waste Operating Reserve, which we have money in reserve for Valley Waste. All their surpluses come back to us at our proportionate share. And as I mentioned before, the operating reserve for Valley Waste contained $349,200 at March 31st. One thing that was found out on Friday by me was that they had made a request of the town to establish an equipment, or all their partners, to establish an equipment reserve. They're looking at the town's portion of this particular request, 10.3%, equals $51,150. And that is not in this budget. If council wishes to allow them to have an equipment reserve of $51,150, our share, $51,150, then that amount will be added to this particular section, and it'll also be an increase in the transfer from the Valley Waste Reserve, so it'll be paid 100% by the Valley Waste Reserve that we have. So it'll reduce that $349,200 down to $252,850 if we chose to pay the additional $51,150. So council will have to decide whether they want to add that into the budget.
Director Polk, just a question about, so the 45.3 is funded from the surplus, and I know that it had come to council with regards to the surpluses remaining with Valley Waste and not coming back to town. So I'm assuming that collectively, I'm sort of looking at you too, that collectively that was decided against that.
Yep.
Right, okay. So there's 349,000 in reserve after we take out the 45.2?
No.
That's
but
before.
That's what before. At
That's-
March 31st, we have $349,200. If we take out we have to take out the 45.2.
Right.
That'll give us $304,000.
Okay.
And if council wishes to allow them to have an equipment reserve.
Okay.
Then it would take it down to $252,850 that we would have in our operating reserve for Valley Waste purposes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Director Kroll, when you received this from Valley Waste about the equipment reserve, did they give you a schedule? Because one of the things we talked about at Valley Waste was there was a whole bunch of, we need this machine, we need a new one of those machines, we need, right? But there was nothing concrete to say, here's a schedule and here's a plan where, like the Kemptville Police, where we know we're buying a vehicle every year and we're on a 3-year rotation for our vehicles. Did they have something like that?
I didn't on Friday get that. I got basically a spreadsheet that basically shows the partners and how much they would like to have from each of the partners for the equipment reserve. The total equipment reserve they're looking for is $500,000. And like I said, our share is $51,150, but I haven't got anything to support what they intend to do or what they planned on buying, and
Nor did I, and that's, thank you.
all right. The next segment we're looking at is housing and other public health. We're looking at public health remaining exactly as it was last year, $101,500. The deficit of the Western Regional Housing Authority mandatory costs we've left at $90,000. it can be an up and a down thing, so we find the sweet spot, $90,000, kind of gives us some room to move either way. Public health grants are open to application. These are the grants that council affords to any entity that falls within public health or that type of thing. So all the grants in this budget remain identical to what council approved last year. There is a grant listing that council will have to deliberate at some point in time as to who or whom will get any grant monies this year. So that may be something separate in another meeting that you might have. I have the information here with me. If you wanted to have it, I could hand those spreadsheets out, and you can look at the formulas and whatnot at your leisure. So environmental development planning is the next section. We're looking at this particular segment moving up $9,100 or 3.9%. We're looking at remuneration and benefits moving up $8,800, and office expense, a very small amount, $300, all in $9,100. There's an increase in their office expense. Insurance moved up very slightly. Training moved up $500, and drafting and mapping moved up $1,000. But there were many reductions in other office supply accounts, which afforded just basically a small increase of $300 all in for their office. The next section is community development. We're looking at community development moving up $46,600 or 12% to $435,800. Remuneration and benefits move up $3,800 in this particular segment. Office supplies for the individuals in economic development moved up $1,500. Economic development community economic development moved up $4,000, and this relates to studies and projects that may be undertaken in this particular segment. It moved up $4,000. Debt charges in this segment moved down $3,400. The debt is declining in this particular section. Tourism has moved up $5,100. We have, it's all related to the Visitors Information Center. Additional staff person is charged off at $3,100 increase, and increases in the operations $2,000 for a total of $5,100. Under promotions, the events expenditures increased $5,000 for summer and fall events such as Pumpkin Walk and Multicultural Festival, and the Center Square segment has increased $11,000, and mainly due to the Comfort Station expenditures, the maintenance of that, and the lease of the space. And the Apple Blossom Festival is back in the budget this year. That will be held this year, so we're looking at $17,000 for the town's work on the Apple Blossom Festival later this year. So we're looking at all in $46,600.
Deb, Apple Blossom allotment, the 17,000. Based on other years, that would be down considerably, would it not?
Actually, I think it's a bit of an increase. It's usually between $12,000 and $15,000 that we
Okay.
usually spend,
Okay,
so it's just a small increase.
okay.
Recreation administration is the next section. We're looking at this moving up $7,500, 1.4%, to $546,300. Remuneration and benefits move up in this particular section $11,200. Office expenses down $17,100. And there's a decrease in legal fees in this section, as well as a decrease in professional fees. And most of that decrease of $17,100 comes from this decrease in professional fees. That moved down $20,500. There was an increase in insurance for $1,300, an increase in other travel expenses and E811 subscription share, and that moved up $3,100. On the vehicle side, we're looking at increases of $13,400. There's an increase of $900 for insurance, a lease, $1,800 increase, fuel, $2,700 increase, and repairs and maintenance for vehicles, $8,000. Recreation couldn't get a new vehicle in 2021, and therefore repairs and maintenance have increased, and until they get a new vehicle and can get their hands on a new vehicle or two, their repairs and maintenance charges will increase. So we have built that into this budget. Total all-in, $7,500 for recreation administration. Recreation programs has moved up $29,800, about 21.4%, to $169,100. We're looking at programs moving up $24,800. We have the swimming program increasing at $13,200 over last year, and this is due to wages of staff and the lower registration expectations. Day camp net cost increase is $2,600, and this is increased in wages and increase in registration. There are 9 positions, 1 camp director, 4 junior camp leaders, and 4 counselors. There's a summer outreach program, which will be 3 positions. They're specialty leaders, and this is a net increase of $9,000, and it's purely an increase in the wage section. Under the Parks Division, we have an increase of $5,000, and this is related to a part-time horticulturalist for 8 months and a part-time park attendant for 8 months. Also in this section, which isn't shown here because there is no change, are the grants to recreation programs. Last year's grants were in the Apples Valley Trail Coalition, was $2,000, Glooskap Curling for $2,000, and Flying Squirrel Adventures for $2,000. Those have been inserted in this draft budget at the same level as last year until council has decided what they want to do with the grant segment of the program.
Are there any grants that offset some of those wages and staff?
There's a junior intern that we're getting a grant for, somewhere between $10,000 to $14,000. And they're applying for grants. I don't think we have firm commitments from the federal or provincial government about firm commitments for any summer staff, but we typically get grants from the federal government. So I'm hopeful that that will come through before too long. We'll get word on that.
Thank you.
Recreation facilities is the next segment. We're looking at recreation facilities moving up $57,000 or 9.3% to $668,000. Remuneration and benefits related to the arena personnel, $19,300 lift. Building an office for the arena, $18,700. We're looking at the building moving up $17,500. We're looking at building roof repairs. We're looking at $4,500, give or take, for that. And the compressor needs to be repaired, so we're looking at between $10,000 to $15,000 for that. Office miscellaneous telephone accounts, telephone and miscellaneous accounts have also moved up $1,200. Under parks overall, we're looking at parks moving up $15,100. Parks and playgrounds general account has moved up $10,000, and all the other parks all in have moved up $6,100. Other facilities has moved up $3,900 from last year. We're looking at the rec center increasing by $3,600, the pool by $3,100, tennis has moved down $500, other facilities has moved up $700, and rail corridor maintenance has been decreased by $3,000. So all in for facilities, $57,000 increase. Recreation debt charges and cultural. This segment moves up 5.2%, $8,200 to $166,200 from last year. We're looking at debt interest moving up $3,200. That's fixed costs. We know what those costs are. Library operations have moved up $5,000. This is per the lease agreement. Our lease agreement shows that we must increase our particular payment for lease by the cost of living denoted in February, which was 5.7%. Or $4,700. The total lease expenditure in 22-23 will be $86,600, and 50% of that is paid by the County of Kings, and you'll see that in the revenues side of the ledger. An increase in the repairs and maintenance for the library has moved up very slightly, $300. And the transfer to the regional library remains the same. That's a mandatory cost, $42,800. No change from last year. Education is the next segment. We're looking at education moving up $12,000 to $1.6 million, and it's the appropriation to the Regional Center for Education. The provincial rate is assumed to remain stable at 30.5 cents. Our Kentville's percentage has decreased this year from 10% to 9.93% in this particular budget. Student population for Kentville increased by 4 students. We now have 767 students that we are paying for. The cost per student increased from $2,110 to $2,115. And this, of course, is based on a unique agreement in the Valley region. It's a calculation of uniform assessment and student population in each of the municipal units of the the region for Annapolis Valley Region Center for Education, and includes Kentville, Kings County, Wolfville, Berwick, and the former town of Hantsport. The next segment it's the financing and transfers on the expenditure side of the ledger. This has moved up $85,800 or 5.9%, $1.5 million. Debt charges, principal repayments for this year, $3,600 increase. Transfers to the province, transfers to reserve for the operating has moved up $66,200, and this is related to setting aside funds for collective bargaining for the Atlantic Police Association collective agreement and the CUPE collective agreement. Transfers to reserve for capital remain as last year, no change in that. The transfer was $413,100 last year, and it remains $413,100 this year. Capital paid out of operations is moved up $16,000, and it relates to the Kentville Police Service vehicle that that typically we buy every year through our current revenue streams. It's moved up from, or what was $50,000 would buy a car, now it costs $66,000 to buy a car for the police service. So we've increased that $50,000 line item from last year to $66,000 this year. Total increase, $85,800. So just looking at an expenditure summary, this is the end of the expenditure side. We're looking at a $14.5 million operating budget in 22-23. The change is an increase of $871,000 or 6.4%. You can see the increase or decrease. It's all increases, there are no decreases in each of those budgets, which total the $871,000. So that's the end of the expenditure side of the ledger. We're now going to move into the revenue side of the ledger. I need more water.
Education. You said it was sort of a special thing that, how do normal municipalities do it?
It's based on uniform assessment only. So we've got a unique agreement in the province that includes the student population, which we think is more fair. Anyway, we'll move on then to the revenue streams. So we collect taxes other than taxation, other than property taxes. And this particular segment of the revenue stream has moved up $33,700 or 2.2%. The Kentville Business Park Commercial segment will give us, thank you so much. The Kentville Business Park Commercial will afford us $43,900 in new tax dollars. The assessment base increased $1.9 million, or 6.1%. We're assuming that the rate remains the same. The rate is the county commercial rate. We're assuming that rate will remain the same. The fire area rate we've spoken before has moved up $18,500. And as I mentioned before, it's the capital tax, which is piggybacked on the town's tax levies. It's approved by the ratepayers of the Kentville Volunteer Fire, or the ratepayers at a meeting held by the fire department on March the 7th, 2022. The rate has remained essentially stable at 3.75 cents per 100. And the town charges the 4% admin fee for this. However, at the end of the day, this really is a nil effect to the town. Whatever we collect, we pay off, except for the 4% admin fee. Whatever we collect, we pay to the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department for their area rate. The same with the hydrant area rate. It's based on Nova Scotia Utility Review Board requirement. Whatever we collect in tax, we pay off to the Kentville Water Utility. And as it's our own entity, we don't charge anything for doing that for the Kentville Water Utility. So $23,700 expenditure, $23,700 revenue. It's nil effect to the town. The frontages are down $2,000, so this relates to betterments or local improvements, curbing infrastructure in some subdivisions. The revenue stream is dropping as properties change hands. The betterment charge is paid off with the closing costs, as well as curb frontages are no longer charged off to the developer at this time. Bell Alliant has moved down $3,000, and this is based on 4% of gross revenue generated in the town of gross subscription exchange services, and this is through Chapter 156, Section 21 of the Incorporation of the Maritime Tel Company Limited Act. So it's been moving downwards every year, so we've discounted that $3,000. All in $33,700, and that should, of new revenue. We're looking at services provided. We're looking at services provided to other governments, provincial, the secondment. We have a seconded officer, Kentville Police Service, changes in total $18,900. We're looking at $229,900 in services provided revenue. It's an increase of 9%. The provincial secondment will afford us $16,600 in additional monies this year. This relates to the wages, benefits, uniforms, and other expenses paid to us by the province for the one officer who is working on the seconded program. And it's based, the wages, and of course, are based on collective increment increases as well. So because there was a lift in their collective agreement, there's a lift in the wages that the province will pay back to us. Local County of Kings Library has moved up $2,300. And as I mentioned before, this has moved upwards 5.7%. The county pays 50% of the lease, $43,300 this year. It's a lift of $2,300 from last year. Sales of services, we're looking at a change of $20,400, 2%. We transfer administrative overheads to our own agencies, to sanitary sewer, to the water utility, and to the capital funds. That's moved up $21,800. Finance sales to Kentville Volunteer Fire Department and County of Kings for their crossing guard. We will get $1,500 in new revenue. The Public Works street sweeper rental is added back into the budget this year. We rented the street sweeper last year significantly, but we've just erred on the side of caution and put $1,500 in for this year. Our recreation operations, KCA Lawn Care, we were informed in mid-March that KCA no longer would want to use the town for its lawn care services, and therefore this has been removed from the budget, so it's a decrease of $4,400. So we're looking at sales moving upwards $20,400. The next segment is other revenue. We're looking at other revenue moving down very slightly, $800. We're looking at fines and fees moving down $7,700, mainly due to a drop in provincial fines and fees. We didn't achieve that budget last year, so we have discounted that particular segment by $10,000. Parking tickets, I've moved that upwards. We've exceeded that last year with according to our actual figures at the end of March. We have a small increase in taxi licenses and miscellaneous permits, but the big kicker here was the drop in provincial fines. Rentals have moved up $7,800 from last year. We're looking at recreation center rental increasing by $3,000, field rentals increasing by $10,000, and small additions to tennis court rent, hub building rent, and pool rent, and all in those three are increased by $2,000. However, there's a drop of $20,000 in ice rentals for the arena. And special events has been added back to the arena this budget, $10,000 related to home show, which has been outsourced this year. And the rental of parking spaces in the town has increased by $2,200, which is a reflection of the actual spaces that we are renting at this time. Interest has been moved down $3,000. Interest on bank deposits has increased by $3,000 due to the increase in prime and the expected further increases in prime, and we do have significant sums in our bank accounts, so we have moved that up. We have moved that up $3,000, but interest on taxes receivable is decreased by $6,000, as 99% of our taxes are collected each year, and many citizens, corporate and residential citizens, are prepaying their taxes. So we have some $300,000 already collected for our 22-23 levy. So I've discounted that particular line by $6,000. We did not achieve that budget line in 21-22. So we're looking at an increase in other revenue, draft 1, and that total at the bottom is wrong. It should be, it's a decrease of $800. You proofread things 1,000 times. It never fails. I've gone over this thing 1,000 times. Anyway, sorry about that. Unconditional transfers, we're looking at unconditional transfers moving down, $300, $220,900, and it's related purely to the Nova Scotia Power Grant, $300. There's no rhyme or reason to what they pay us, but it's usually around $8,100. But we didn't meet our budget last year, so I've discounted that. Conditional transfers is the next segment. We're looking at this change of $45,400, 36.3%. The federal government has provided us with Canadian Parks and Recreation Association has sent us information that they will give us anywhere between $10,000 to $14,000, and this relates to the junior intern for recreation services. The provincial government has committed $35,400 for the Community Crisis Navigator, which I spoke of before. This program will be run by the Kentville Police Service, and from April to December, and it will support programs and initiatives that alleviate the effects of poverty. So those two amounts, the $35,400 has been received already. We have a written commitment from the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association for the $10,000 to $14,000. We've put $10,000 in at this time because some of the cost relates to expenses for the program itself, and we don't know what that is at this time. Financing transfers revenue is moving downwards, $44,800 to $272,200. There was a transfer last year for a specific transfer. It was a one-time deal. It was $4,300 for monies that we received that we transferred back into operating. That's gone, so we've taken that out of the budget. Operating reserve surpluses for the prior years. We're using 3 2/3 cents this year to balance this budget. Just for council's information, 1 cent on our general tax rate is $58,100 in 22-23. Transfer from the Kentville, from the King's Transit Safe Restart Operating Reserve has moved down $49,000. We transferred $66,100 last year. All that's left is $17,100, which will be withdrawn this year and used to pay for the $17,600 that their expenditure has increased this year. The transfer from Valley Waste Operating Reserve is increased $35,000. Last year, we transferred $10,200. That was the lift last year. This year, the lift is $45,200, so it's an increase of $35,000. So the change all in for transfers into revenue from our reserve funds is down $44,800. So looking at the revenue summary, we're looking at revenue from everything other than property taxation, $4.7 million. It's an increase of $72,500 or 1.6%. And you can see the particular segments there and what makes up the $72,500. So at the end of the day, do we have a surplus or a shortfall in our funding? So we know that our expenditures increased $871,000. We also know that other revenue increases $72,500, which leaves us with a shortfall of $798,500. New tax dollars, budget to budget from last year to this year, affords us with new tax dollars of $798,500, which leaves us with no shortfall, no surplus, no shortfall. So basically, the tax rates in this budget remain stable. We're looking at the general tax rate in draft 1. We're looking at expenditures at $14,541,200, less revenue from other than taxation, $4,719,800, less mandatory charges paid to the province of Nova Scotia, $2,017,600 for a municipal tax levy of $7,803,800. You can see our net taxable assessment there at $581.3 million. The municipal general rate moves to $1.34 and about a quarter. And that is a decrease, that is an increase, pardon me, of 2.6 cents, or about 2 2/3 cents. The mandatory rate last year was 37 2/3 cents. This year, the mandatory rate has decreased to 34 3/4 cents, which is approximately a 3-cent decrease. So at the end of the day, we're looking at the general rate dropping about 1/3 cent from last year. Last year, the general rate combined was $1.69 1/5 cents. So as I mentioned before, 1 cent on the general rate is $58,100. Last year, it was $53,300, so that's an increase of $4,800. The 1 cent on the commercial rate is $8,100, and that's identical to what it was last year. The 1 cent on the residential rate last year was $45,200. This year, it's $50,000. So we're looking at that moving up $4,800. So the effect of the, oh, I got some fun stuff there. The effect of the assessment increase, we know that the cap has moved up 5.4%, so a $100,000 assessment now is assessed at $105,400. We're looking at the tax rates remaining the same as last year. What does this mean to a $100,000 assessment? That's moved to $105,400. We're looking at an $83 increase over the year, or 5.4%, which is identical to the lift of the cap, which works out to about $1.60 a week for the increase. So the rates to balance this budget, you can see the rates here. A provincial mandatory rate is at 34 3/4 cents. The fire area rate is 3 3/4 cents. The hydrant area rate is 7 1/5 cents. The economic development rate for residential is a fraction of a cent. It's about 1/5 of a cent. For commercial, it's 10 1/3 cents. Other rates, so the other rates that we collect for residential, it's about 45 3/4 cents per 100. For commercial, it's 56 cents per 100. The residential mill rate moves to $1.07, almost $1.08. The commercial municipal rate moves to $2.95 So the total residential rate remains the same as last year, 153 3/4. The commercial rate remains the same as last year, 351 2/5. So comparing the rates, you'll just see the different rates as compared to last year and this year. So you can see that the rates have moved up and down, depending on whether it's municipal, mandatory, economic development rate, or whatever, but the total for residential remains the same, and the total for commercial remains the same. So to balance the budget for resident,
Could you go back to that previous slide?
I will try.
Oh, okay. It's just about the economic levy,
Okay,
economic development. So res, commercial last year, this year. So that's actually going down.
yes, because assessments have gone up.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, that's the end of my question. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So balancing the budget for residential, we're looking at the rates here across the top. These are all the new rates, works out to a total levy of $1,620, or an increase of 5.4% on a $100,000 assessment. Those are the $100,000 And the $5,400 lift is shown here separately, just for your information. And we have the comparison of the rates last year. And as I said, the rates have moved up and down depending on what they were, but at the end of the day, the total residential rate remains flat as it was last year. The same thing for commercial. We're looking at the commercial rates remaining flat, even though the municipal rate, the mandatory rate, and the area rates have moved upwards and downwards. At the end of the day, $3.51 and 2/5 cents is the balanced budget for commercial. So we have a balanced budget for you here in draft one, and we're anxious to hear what you think.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Deb, and all of the directors for your work that's gone into this. We truly appreciate your time, your effort. I didn't see the sword come out this year, so I think that must be a good year. There may have been some little knives, or if you follow the comics in the Chronicle Herald, a set of tongs apparently can also be used as a knife now. Not really sure about that, but
Oh, I don't
anyway.
know.
Yeah. So instead of the sword, you may just bring a set of tongs with you next
Well,
year.
I do a lot of cooking.
Okay, all you need is those tongs. We have a decision to make, council, whether we recommend this to council at the April 25th, or whether we return this budget to staff for work. They have provided us with a balanced budget, so I'd say, other than perhaps a few cosmetic things and that, but we'll go around the room and get your sense. And if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate. There are no stupid questions, and even if it's the same question that you asked last year, or the year before, or the one that you left here last year thinking, I should have asked that question, please do. Deb is more than happy to provide the feedback. So we'll start with you, Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. My only concern is it's not about our budget or anything that Deb's done, but the price of everything's going up, and when we look at things like Valley Waste, Kentville Fire, King's Transit and stuff like that, they've just been so used to, this is our ask, this is what we want, and normally they get it. The economic state right now of, I guess, the country and the world, I think we should get more outside information on those things. We know all of our departments, and we know what it costs to run them, and we know where they spend the money. I don't know, even though it's a balanced budget, we had a good year assessment-wise. I think, I'd really like to do comparisons. I've told Dan this, I've told everyone this, when it comes to the intermunicipal service agreements. If there's someone that can get us to subsidize them, they will. So I think we should look long and hard at a few of those outside sources. And basically, what the county did with Kentville Fire a few years ago was they said, this is what you're asking, yes, this is what we're giving you. So, you know, good job to Deb and staff for getting this all put together, but I do have concerns about organizations that we don't control. Thank you.
All right, thank you. As you know, Councillor, the mayors and CAOs of our region are meeting at this point in time, looking at our IMSAs and whether or not we're actually getting the value for the money that we're paying into them. And so that will be a study. You know, it's not going to be in the near term, but we will have those answers. And as you say, perhaps we go into, instead of owner mode, into service provision mode, and that will be put before council as well. So although it's not a today answer, it is coming down the pipe.
Yep,
So thank you. Councillor Huntley.
I just want to say thank you. It was a great presentation, and there's a lot of hard work in there, and I would recommend that this draft go to our council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. Great job, Director Cole. A lot of work went into that, and those slides are like movie material. They're easy to follow, and I'm okay with most of it. The only thing I have a concern with kind of is Valley Run, and I think that should be discussed at some point because you commit the 29,000, but you're also committing a second year because you have to give them a year notice when your time's up. So you're kind of stuck in it for 2 years. So if that's something we're going to move forward with, it would be nice to maybe give them the notice in advance, and then you're only committed to 1 year rather than spending 60,000. If that's something that we need to move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian, the REN is also part of the IMSA discussions, so there will be more forthcoming on that. We have a meeting this week, actually, so yeah, there will be more coming forward. Councillor York.
Thank you. So I'd like to take a moment to thank all the directors for their hard work getting everything ready, and then, of course, Director Kroll for probably pushing back and getting it even more polished. So thank you for your hard work. I know it doesn't come together quickly. I'm also very encouraged to see the return of programming to such a strong level here in our community. And we heard at the public meeting that there's definitely a want and there's definitely a need for more community programming. And I'm really glad to see that being responded to and reflected in our budget. I'm also really glad to see just a general renaissance of community building happening in our town through recreation programming, but also through the Kemptville Police Services as well. So I'm really glad to see that the wants and the needs of the community are being heard, and then we're putting our money where our mouth is, quite literally. So I'm very glad to see that being reflected in our budget this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Director Kroll, and to the rest of the directors. I know a lot of hard work goes into these budget preparations. So thank you for that. Just a couple of things, and maybe I'm just not seeing it here, and I sort of asked about this, and we had said that it had gone down, was that economic development levy. And I know that KBC had asked for an increase year over year of the $6,500. And so if we were to do that increase for them for the $6,500 for the next year, I think the increase on those levies would, between the three, the residential, the commercial, and the industrial, would be fairly minute.
Minor,
Right?
fractions of a cent.
Okay, so that would be, as sort of the liaison between the committee and council, that's something that I would like to see, a minor change, fraction, as we call it. Change in the budget. The other thing that that I had looked at, and I know the residential and the commercial rent rates are staying the same year over year because we got that enormous bump, 5.4 in capped assessments, which was great, but hard on the public as well. But I mean, certainly good for our bottom line. I look at the growth that's happening in Kemptville, and I look at the Don Hiltz connector and sort of what that's going to look like on a go-forward basis, and how that's going to be afforded. And, you know, and I know tonight we're talking about a federal grant with respect to that. But I think as time goes on and more work goes into that there'll be other ways that we as a town will you know, look at charging for those types of things and that sort of development, and what that's going to look like and feel like in terms of dollars for us. Just to echo what Councillor York said about the community police program, I think that's wonderful. I'm happy to see that happen. I think that the town needs it. I think it's been a while since we've had that. I don't know how many years it's been, but quite a number, I think. 3 or 4, yeah. So I'm really happy to see that come back into the budget. So great work on that. And those are my comments overall. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everybody for all the hard work that you've put into bringing us a balanced budget, which is excellent. I'd like to say that any time that we can maintain or improve our services, which is what's happening in and with this budget, that's a good thing. And you know, we have a balanced budget. We're maintaining and improving our services to the public. We've obviously listened to what we were told, and I think the public is going to see some positive change come up over the next year and with this budget. And I'm very pleased with it. So thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you very much. So I guess it's my turn. So I'm the only one, obviously, that's going to have an ask here of you. And my first ask would start with the legislative page and our expenses. So our expenses have been relatively low for the last 2 years with COVID because we were not traveling and really not going on any courses. So I guess I would ask that our expenses go back to pre-2020. So our 2019 budget year, those expense levels. The other thing as well is interpretation services. I realize that it does have to do with council, but I'm not sure that it belongs on the legislative page, just, the way that we tend to put things in order, sort of thing. My other concern is training, and I just want to make sure that we have enough training dollars for our staff in our budget, because we really have had a 2-year deficit of opportunities for training and that sort of thing. So, if we can look at this, we have very good reserves, and I think training for staff, especially to make up for a 2-year deficit, is truly in order. The other one is, I'm going to say, a personal bugaboo. And that is with regards to the way that we list our grants. Is it not possible to have a single line that says we have $26,000 in grants, and then when we go away and actually allocate the grants based on the input that we receive, then they can go in the budget? Because when I look at this, what we're actually doing is we're approving a budget that has grants that aren't actually going to go to these entities. And then at the end of the day, it's going to look like we didn't spend that money. So I just ask if we could just go to a single line item and then have an addendum. And I realize that, it throws a monkey wrench in things, but it would just be so much cleaner for all of us, and that way it would allow council to track the grant money that we don't allocate at the first swing, and so that if we have groups coming back, we know what we have. So that's my ask, and again, I want to say thank you very much for your hard work. I know that you have been very busy with this, doing this work. I see you every day in here, and the back and forth. So to the CAO, I've given you 3 requests. Deputy Mayor has put something with regards to the economic levy. So if we were to approve or to recommend this budget to April 25th council meeting, would it be possible to, without changing our tax rate, look at this budget going to April 25?
Thank you, Mayor Snow. I don't see why not. I think as you heard Director Kroll talk about, that on the reserve side of things, there's some consideration. So, and as well, the tax rate adjustment for KBC would be very, very small. So I think if council leaves that with us, we certainly would make every effort to bring back the bottom line remaining the same, but some reallocation in order to accomplish those pieces. The only other item that I would say was there that perhaps also council would, whether they do it now at this budget or shortly within the next couple of months, would be the Valley Waste piece. We'll make a request to them to get a 5-year capital plan, which we can bring back in, and I might even have that as soon as for our next meeting, and then that consideration can be put in there as well. Okay.
Okay, we'd appreciate that, particularly Councillor Gerard's comments as, you know, as our board member on that,
For sure.
that board, you know, not knowing how they want to spend the money or how they want to step it out. The other question is if this is a capital, and they don't know how they're going to spend it, is it going to be sitting in their bank account, or could we keep it in our bank account until they need it?
I'd rather keep it.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you on that
Sorry.
one, Deb, every single time. Because we all know that our FCIs, when it comes to money in the bank, you know, the government has changed the percentage on an annual basis. And we always seem to be just behind the number. And it so keeps us in the yellow, even though we should be in the green, because we're pretty clean, you know, as far as our funds are.
I would say, Mayor Snow, regardless of whatever approach is taken here, Kentville's approach of surpluses returning and sitting in a reserve within the town, that wouldn't change regardless.
Okay.
So I think it's relatively straightforward process to be looking at a surplus deficit situation with an IMSA, and then look at anything that would come back. I think the most telling tale would be on these reserves if they're going to be allocated relatively quickly. So I don't anticipate that a lot of these reserves are going to sit for 5 years. So particularly knowing some of the deficits that we've heard on some of the machinery. So I would think that as long as we have a reasonable capital list of items, then we should be able to do some matching pretty easy on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. Just, how much were you looking or requesting to add back in for council expenses?
It's not a large amount.
Okay.
So my account would go from 7,000 to, actually what it's written underneath. If you look at that line item, it actually adds up to $9,100.
Okay.
And then the only changes to councils would be the personnel who are traveling to FCM would go to 6,000 because of flying there.
Right.
Yeah, so those would be the changes. So it's not significant in that manner. And as well, just the annotation of our phones are part of our expenses as well.
Thank you.
Mayor
Thank you.
Snow, may I ask how many people are going to FCM? Just two?
Two counselors.
Two counselors and yourself?
And me, yes, please, thank you. All right, so are we ready? We do have a recommendation for council to recommend approval of the draft 2022-2023 operational budget in the amount of $14,541,200. I was gonna get it right this year, I really was. To the April 25th council meeting, and with no tax rate. And I realize that when the motion comes to council, Deb will actually have the tax rates in the motion at that time, and,
And if I may say that with the changes that you're asking for, that the amount will not be 14,500,000, it'll be a little bit more. Just bear in mind that the
Okay.
total will change because of those additions.
okay,
The tax rate won't,
okay.
but the amounts that you're going to see for revenue and expenditure will.
Okay, so this is our recommendation. So if our motion was to read that we recommend for council to approve the draft 2022-2023 operational budget as directed to the CAO to the April 25th council meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Counselor Huntley? Yes. For a second. So it has been moved and seconded that council recommend approval of the draft 2022-2023 operational budget to the April 25th council meeting with the changes as directed to the CAO. Is there any discussion on this matter? Counselor Maxwell?
Thank you. I don't have a clear understanding of the deputy mayor's request with regard to the levy for commercial. That has to do with KBC, but I'm not exactly sure what exactly it has to do with KBC.
Thank you. Director Kroll, did you want to put that, can you put that
Oh.
slide back up just to,
Which one are we looking at?
slide number 47.
47. All right, let's see if I can go back here.
No, I'm wrong.
Oh,
How about 49? So
I
that-
got 49.
There we
Here
go, perfect.
Okay. How about that?
Councillor
Okay.
Maxwell, can you actually see this slide?
Yes,
So what the deputy mayor is asking, last year, for example, the rate for residential was 0.0016 cents. This year, we put it down to 0.14, so that we would match last year's contribution to KBC, but they've come to us with requesting a $6,500 lift. And if we kept it the way it was last year, would that give us the $6,500 to balance that request? Is that correct, Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Is that just-
they're looking for $6,500 more than last year.
Correct.
So yes, we'll have to do a little bit of math to find out what the new rate would be for residential and the new rate for commercial. And we'll do a little massaging in the background to make sure that the rates for residential, total residential and total commercial remain exactly as you see here today.
okay, so
But the
that's
rate
just a
will-
one-time thing.
That's correct. Until we get a proper, because we've been doing an annual contract with
Right,
them,
right.
where previously we had the 4-year contract.
Yes, that's what I
And,
mean.
yeah, so we've got to go back to that.
So this is a one-year, yeah, okay, thank you.
Is there anything further? Are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to recommend approval of the draft 2022-2023 operational budget to the April 25th council meeting with the changes as directed to the CAO. Oh, very good. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, staff. Beauty. And there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned, and the time is 6:36. And do we wish to take a break, or do we wish to wait and come back for 7 for CAC?
I keep going.
Take a break and a 5-minute break.
Okay, all right, so we'll, do you want to go ahead, CEO?
I think folks were saying 5-minute break.
So 5-minute break, so how about, since the bathrooms are going to get backlogged, we'll go with return here at 6:45.
Okay.
So if you could let our Facebook followers know that we're going to start the mic's going to be hot. Good evening, and welcome to the Council Advisory Committee CAC meeting of the 11th of April, 2022. This meeting is being held in chambers, and we are observing COVID-19 protocols. You will note that members of council are seated in their carrels, and it is requested that members wear their mask unless speaking. Staff and citizens are spaced around the room, and citizens must remain in their seat unless departing the chamber or rising to speak, and must wear a mask at all times while in the chamber. The meeting is being live streamed on Facebook Live, and the most up-to-date meeting package is on the Town of Kentville website. This meeting is called to order. Have all of the councillors received and reviewed their meeting package? Does any member of council have information pertaining to a matter before this council which has not been publicly circulated? As the Council Advisory Committee, CAC, we will vote as a committee to either send business forward to the council meeting for ratification, return to staff for further information, or review or defeat the recommendation. I will remind members of council that we should continue to be mindful of our decision-making wheel to make balanced and respectful decisions while adhering to our code of conduct. This council, through policy and our last council meeting by motion, has adopted Robert's rules as our rules of order and our parliamentary procedure, and as chair of the meeting, it is my responsibility to use those orders to ensure that we get the business of the town done. We will be voting electronically on all motions except administrative, which will be by show of hands. Are there any conflict of interest issues we should be aware of before the meeting commences? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I will declare a conflict under new business 8C. Thank you.
Thank you. You have that? Okay, perfect. I note that all members of council are present and we have quorum. We have been provided with a proposed agenda. Are there any further additions to the agenda? If I could have a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Councillor Huntley, thank you. And the seconder, Councillor Maxwell, thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. The minutes of the March 14th, 2022 CAC meeting have been distributed for approval. If there are no changes, the minutes are approved as distributed. If there are changes, the recording secretary will annotate the minutes. Are there any changes? None? All right, moving right along then. We have one presentation this evening, and our presenter is here, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation, followed by questions from council, and our time doesn't count on your time, so please, we appreciate that you're here this evening, Brianna, and you are our physician navigator, and it's the annual update. So thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So nice to actually be here in person this time. I think last year we did this on Zoom, so. I'm Brianna Hall, the Physician Community Navigator in the Annapolis Valley. And I just wanted to provide an annual update to council, just so everyone can keep up to date where we're at. So this is our PCN presentation. I am one of 9 navigators throughout the province. We meet monthly and discuss many different projects that can be implemented in our communities. Things that we can work on to better our communities and to work on physician retention and accent recruitment efforts by Nova Scotia Health. So why community navigators? So our role is pretty broad, but to dissect that a little bit further for you, accommodations and housing is something that we focus on supporting medical learners and physicians with immigration services, spousal employment, activities, recreational, or it could be social clubs and religious groups, helping them find childcare and information on schools as well. We often find that relocation can be quite tricky, so helping them ease that transition as they come to the Annapolis Valley. So why recruitment consultants? You can see that's very different between my role and a recruitment consultant. So some of the items that they take care of is job fairs, conferences. They look after licensure to practice in Nova Scotia to make sure that checks all the boxes. Site visits, we assist with this when needed with community tours, incentive programs, offer letters and deliverables, onboarding of physicians, connect with community, and the follow-up. So there's a little overlapping here, onboarding of new physicians and connect with community in the follow-up. So those are a few items that we also assist with their recommendation for help. So welcoming community. This is a physician in our photo here that began practice in Kentville just last year. So last year, just a quick recap, we have 12 new physicians received community welcome baskets last year. 5 family medicine resident community events we held every 4 to 6 weeks. We had kind of a lull there in between because we had some hiccups with COVID, of course. Maybe not as many as we would like to have had. We had 5 community tours throughout the Annapolis Valley with visiting physicians, and that was with Nova Scotia Health. And 1 family medicine resident welcome event. This was quite small. We have never felt comfortable enough yet to have a large event, so we're looking forward to that this year in the dead heat of summer. So just some really quick stats for everyone. Physician recruitment stats. These are Annapolis Valley physicians and physicians who began practicing medicine in a new role last year. So new physicians, and some physicians have had changed their scope of their practice, so they have fluently moved into a new position. So 8 family medicine physicians, emergency medicine we have had 3, and specialists 3, and family medicine resident grads we've had 4 new. So a project that we started last year was the survey. We wanted to survey Annapolis Valley physicians to really understand what entices them to come to the Annapolis Valley. What's attractive of, what are the attractions in the Valley? What do we have here that we can offer? Are we marketing and targeting the right areas? So rather than getting started and kind of going about things quite blinded, we decided to circulate this survey with Nova Insight, and it was very well received. We got some great feedback, and we know where to target our marketing materials and how we can fill those gaps. So we're sharing this information with Nova Scotia Health to improve their recruitment and retention, and Dalhousie University as well, and any other allied healthcare professional partners that we work with. So another project, we created a couple of videos, and this is just one to get started.
I've been wanting to move to Nova Scotia for quite a long time. Went to quite a few little communities and immediately felt that full. It's got a lot more to offer than you would think any small town has. We went into the Battle of Fundy when it was high tide, and I've never experienced anything like that. There's just too many things to mention and too many things I'm still looking forward to doing. It is like living in a picture postcard.
A little intimidating coming here initially. It's a small town, and I moved here with my partner. Yeah, I moved to a town of 400 people, and I still find 5 people with the same interests as me that I go surfing backcountry skiing with. I think the biggest thing I noticed starting to work here is especially how collegial everyone is. You just feel immediately very welcome. The specialists and the other family practitioners, they're so helpful and they're so willing to sort of take a call to the wording and help you out wherever you need it. Valley region. People love their doctors, so we found the community was so welcoming. We'll send community do anything for you. It definitely makes you want to stay.
In larger hospitals, you can feel like you're a bit lost in the shuffle, and I don't feel that here. I feel like I'm very, very appreciated for everything I do. The community is large enough that there are a number of different specialties here. I am building a house. This is not my house that we're building. We never want to leave. This is my forever home. The Valley Regional Hospital has a beautiful spirit of community. It's the most friendliest hospital I've ever worked at. It's a dream come true, and I don't want to be anywhere else. I'm very happy to raise my family here. It's an outstanding community here, and I have no qualms about working there for the rest of my life.
So moving right along into our strategic plan for 2022, we have 3 pillars that we would like to work on this year, which is quite similar to where we were last year, but we want to extend and with a few added extensions in here too. So welcoming community, family recruitment, and our funding support. So we would like to continue advertising the Annapolis Valley as an attractive, inclusive, diverse, and supportive community that it is. Expose the hidden gems that we have in our community, showing physicians and their families that the Annapolis Valley truly is the place to have it all. And implement streamlining processes that attract, welcome, engage, support, and retain our physicians and our medical learners in the Annapolis Valley. So under a welcoming community, we are looking to establish a resourceful team of community advisors. We've started this last year based on need, but we're looking to really bulk that up and make sure that we have consistency all throughout the Annapolis Valley as we're having folks reaching out constantly in every community. So develop a physician mentorship program with Mentoring Plus strategy. We also will have a more one-on-one support too as well, so 2 separate programs. Invite physicians and their families to local community events and encourage them to participate. And under family recruitment, we want to develop a spousal support program and for newcomers with Y-Reach and the Valley Connector program. Partner with Nature for Newcomers team. We've just started partnering this year and it's been going really great. Continue building relationships by staying connected with local business community and the citizens we have here. Expanding our focus to welcome and support all physicians, med students, and locums, in addition to family medicine residents that we initially began our project with. Develop Annapolis Valley welcome bags for med students that are visiting physicians on their community tours. We launched this in the fall. It's been very well received. Physician outreach program we launched in the fall as well and continued on this year, which is making a touch point with physicians every quarter at over 22 clinics and practices throughout the Annapolis Valley. Hosting events and social networking events for physicians, so hopefully COVID can step aside so we can get our work done. This is our leveraged funds to date. So our list of partners that we have here. My funding for my position is supported by community stakeholders and town's municipality funding. For project, the projects are funded by Communities, Cultures, Tourism, and Heritage through their Healthy Community Stream. And we also are supported by Doctors Nova Scotia as well. They do give us funding for projects. And the Valley Wren and the AVCC are in kind as well. So we would like to ask for a partnership with the town of Kemptville. We've had 66 medical learners in the Annapolis Valley as of last year, and 24 locums and new physicians last year in the Annapolis Valley. So we are seeing that Kemptville, where we have a regional hospital in this catchment area, it's very important to have support through the town of Kemptville. We've partnered with a lot of community groups that are in this area too as well, and yeah, we just think that it would be really great to have that partnership and to have a voice around the table with us steering our projects. So I would like to ask the town of Kemptville for $4 per person on the 811 list of Need a Family Practice Registry, which in Kemptville is 2,081 residents, which is $8,324, and I've rounded down to $8,000 as our ask. So we generate a report quarterly, and we meet 4 times a year. So it's not a major commitment as per time, but we would certainly like to have your voice there and your help as well and resources. Thank you so much for letting me come and present to your council. It's been a pleasure. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram under the AVCC, and we are posting often all of our updates.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brianna. I will open it up to questions from council. Councillor York.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm wondering how early on in the process you, or through your office, recruitment happens. So are we recruiting while physicians are still in their learning stages when they're doing their practicum locations here in the Valley? And are we also piggybacking on the union, or the Dell Resident Union family days that they have? I know often they have like family days that happen locally, so are we piggybacking on those activities as well to recruit them while they might not yet have a job?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes and yes.
Okay, great.
We have expanded, because I know when we were here before, we were really focused on family medicine residents through Dalhousie as our main focus, and really working the retention of that program, which has rose from 40% historically to 60%, and then this year we're just nearing 100% retention, which is great. There's always factors played into that, but we still are hearing the feedback from residents that it's been great to work so closely with them, and they feel more integrated into the community and well supported. So we are continuing to do that, but we've also realized and we really understand that it's the whole picture. So starting from the very beginning with med students and, you know, making that contact and that initial connection is so important to advertise the Valley from the very beginning and right to the end of retiree too, with our mentoring program eventually. So we are stepping back and looking at it from a broader scope. So what this could look like is touch points with the med students. So for example, we have Rural Week coming up in May, and we have just almost 30 students that will be coming to the Annapolis Valley and spread throughout the whole entire region. So what we're planning from our standpoint is to introduce the med students to the community and host a few events for them while they're here. So we're doing a games night with pizza at the new training facility so they can get familiar with the resources they have here, so that maybe they'll want to come back and feel that this is a great place for me to practice. Maybe this is where I want to be. Also, Miners Marsh is another spot that we know most of our med students will be hubbed around Kemptville, and then a few trickled throughout the valley. But we're going to do a small walk with docs there and expose the beautiful wetlands. So I think that we have those connections and those resources this year, that it took so long to build trust and connection. So I think we're at a very sweet spot, and we just are going to hold on to that and keep running. But we also want to reach out throughout the year too, as well, to that fact, and continue to make those connections. We are hearing, it's been almost daily lately, but med students are reaching out for accommodation support throughout the Valley, and that has been huge. So there are 2-week rotations. It could be electives as well. So I felt like over the last year we were doing some of that work, but we weren't necessarily targeting and working heavily there. So, but yeah, it feels really good. I think that there's great things coming this year. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Brianna. It was a great
Thanks.
presentation. I love the video. I love to hear my forever home and the rest of my life. Those are always great things for
Yeah.
new docs to say when they come to the valley. And there certainly is a huge difference between the community navigator and the recruitment consultant. And I've always
Yeah.
seen that there's some major differences there. So your role is important, and I appreciate that. Just want to talk a little bit about the funding model. So you've showed us the leveraged funds here. So the funding model moving forward, is that what it looks like moving forward on a is that what it looks like on a go-forward basis? And in terms of what our role potentially could be in the town of Kemptville,
Yeah.
you're looking for that on a per annum basis, or what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so when I came on in August 2020, these were the funding partners that were already brought on, and they were sitting around the table, and they still are. They still are sitting there and having these conversations with us, which is great. But we have realized that we do need more funding, but we want more partnership too. So we need more resources. We would like to see eventually the whole region come together, which verbally we've heard this. So now we're just walking through those steps and reaching out, trying to get that financial support too as well. This is where we're at for funding. So we have some commitments that are in the works right now. We're just working through that, but this is our time. Through the spring is when we do our presentations. So we're here and we're working through those motions per se. We will be growing, and I do feel that even just this time next year will be even larger than that. As per a commitment, we would love to. Basically we don't reach out all the time. I say we, on behalf of my oversight, I don't reach out on a daily basis to the committee or anything unless it's something that I really need, that I can't wait in between a quarterly meeting for. But they have very much given me the go-ahead they've approved the strat plan, so the strat plan is a strat plan, and it's up to me to create the projects and the programming that's involved around that. And it's been great since we've signed off on that type of model. So yeah, this year we have a lot of new plans in place, and everybody seemed pretty keen on where we've been at. We steered the strat plan actually around the feedback we received from physicians in our survey. So we know it matches, and that's what they're looking for. So it's just a matter of developing those programs and working with our community who have those connections too, to better those programs to what they could be without duplicating.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was very good. You said the Valley Wren does in-kind support. I'm wondering, let's pretend that we couldn't make the 8,000 or that amount. We have a lot of departments here that may be able to help assist. Would in-kind be acceptable as well as a financial commitment, or?
Good question. The reason the REN and the AVCC are in kind is because the REN allows us to advertise our logo. I don't have it up right now, but the logo is partnered with the regional marketing brand to have it all. So they have given us permission, I guess way before I started, but given permission to use this brand to its full extent and just run with it. So we just developed a PCN for Physician Community Navigation logo to match and marry with that. And so that's how we promote ourselves, is always with the Annapolis Valley brand. That has been in kind of coming from the REN, and also the regional marketing website. We are developing a healthcare page there, so that's really, really important, and we're going to bulk that up over the next little bit too, because it just launched. So there's things like that come in kind, but they're not necessarily sitting in our conversations and receiving any of our information necessarily like in a meeting setting. So it's very different. The role is very different, and the AVCC would provide admin support to my role. So my funds are funneled through the AVCC, but I run a separate project. Yeah. So I think there would need to be some sort of a financial commitment, which we would hope for. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. Hi, Brianna.
Hi.
Just wondering, what hospitals are in your catchment?
Yeah, so back to the regional marketing. So we follow the whole region. And so what that looks like, I guess before I started, we were following the Annapolis Valley Teaching Site through Dalhousie University, which is, well, I guess it starts wherever the preceptor starts. So if we're getting technical, right now is New Minas. That's where I have a preceptor further that way, to Annapolis Royal. But we are supporting physicians throughout the whole region. But hospital catchment, Kings County and Annapolis County, we are working in both counties. We have a verbal partnership as well with Annapolis County, so we often work closely with the recruitment committees that are in that area too. And sometimes, like, instead of duplicating, we partner up and we work on retention efforts together. Sometimes it's a housing issue, and Annapolis Royal citizens have stepped up and said, you know, I've got a suite and I don't mind having a med student there for 2 weeks just to lay their head down in between working. So we're creating those databases as the resources come forward. But yeah, very much the whole region.
Okay, thank
Both
you.
counties. Yep.
All right, thank you very much, Brina.
Thank you.
And CAO, we've had an ask from this presentation. Could this result in a staff report back to council for our next CAC meeting, providing us with details, including their request to look at 811. I suspect that 811 is using B4N, which means that it's not all of Kentville, but a much huger, although not very good grammar, much bigger catchment than actually the town of Kentville from that perspective.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Our directors have provided us with their reports for review, and they will provide us with an update and receive questions from council. The reports will be presented and are part of the record of this meeting. Only items of new business arising from the reports will be taken for motion. CAO Troke, could you please introduce our department reports and recommendations?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mayor Snow. So tonight, as we do other nights, we're going to be starting off with our Department of Finance with Director Kroll.
Thank you and good evening again. I've brought several reports. Hopefully we can whip through them fairly quickly so I don't take up your whole evening. We're looking at, firstly, the staff report from the Finance Department for the month ended March 31st, 2022. And this is a shortened report, a shortened version of my finance report, because Schedules A and B are not included because we're in the throes of working paper files and year-end and getting ready for our external annual audit, which will begin on May the 24th, 2022. But I have provided the Schedule C, which is the outstanding taxation. And you can see from what I've shown here that the current year's tax levy at March 31st, 2022 is in a credit balance. So we have $276,764 to the better of our tax levy, or we've collected 101.8% this year for current. And our total property tax, which includes arrears 2 and 3, is showing at a credit balance of $275,271. You can see comparative there for last year was $161,203 in a credit balance. So it equates to about 102.8% collected as compared to last year's figure of 101.7 collected, which is great. The Town of Kentville Capital Investment Plan is Schedule G. I've included the information as at the date I wrote this report for the CAO. We're looking at projects totaling a budgeted $2.3 million, and at the date of writing, we have $1.76 million spent. About 69.1% of our capital program has been spent, and we're still quantifying that at the end of the year as some late invoices are trickling in. Anyway, that is my very short report from the Finance Department for the month ended March 31st.
Thank you very much, Director Kroll, and it's nice that your voice lasted through this, although you still have a few more reports to go. Are there any questions for the Director on this report? There being none, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to give you a small projection report. This is the last projection report for the last fiscal year, March 31st, 2022. I'm reporting a swing upwards, which is great, of $37,900 in our projection. We had projected a surplus of $29,900 last month. This month, we're looking at a surplus position of $67,800. We only had a small amount of change in the revenue streams. We're looking at about $3,600 up in the revenue streams, and most of it's related to miscellaneous revenues. Permits came in over budget, miscellaneous revenue came in over budget, just small ticket items, but it did add up to $3,600. We had the expenditures decreased. The projection for the expenditures has decreased $34,500 from my last report. We have had significant savings in most sectors, but significantly savings were found in general administration, in the office expenditure account, and the IT account. As well, public health has provided updated estimate of our 21-22 housing expenditure, so that gave us some additional savings in that particular segment. And under financing for Kentville Police Service, we were planning to buy another car from our current year's levy, but the police service can't get their hands on one. So we have savings in that particular segment of around $25,500. But it's offset by increases in transportation. The transportation segment has moved up $22,200 from my last report, and that's related to heating in the building has gone way over budget, and repairs and maintenance of vehicles has also gone way over budget. And I think I spoke with that in my budget presentation about the harsh winter and how hard it's been on our vehicles. So those kickers have increased that particular segment by $22,200. And recreation has moved upwards $16,300 from my last report. Programs have been increased by $4,500, and facilities for the arena has moved up $11,500, and it's related to some repairs and maintenance needed at the arena. So at the end of the day, we're looking at a better position than we were last month. We're looking at a $67,800 surplus, and we're still counting things that are coming through the door, so hopefully it shows us more than that at the end of the day.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Are there any questions for the Director on this report? No questions. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I have some resolutions that I'd like to put forth to Council. A withdrawal of number 3 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve, that the capital budget provides for partial funding of capital acquisitions from the town's capital reserve fund. Projects are complete and require a resolution of council to withdraw funds. The details for the capital reserve as follows, and you can see draw 1, draw 2, and draw 3 is what I'm asking for. Some equipment has arrived for the police service in March. I was going to say May, but no, March. And we're looking for $5,833.68 to fund that particular acquisition of equipment for the police service. We're looking at the general allocation reserve containing $1,721,026. And after the withdrawal, it will contain $1,715,192. So my recommendation reads that I recommend to Council Advisory Committee that the attached resolution be approved for a withdrawal of $5,833.68 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation. This transfer will fund capital acquisitions during the year 2021-22. After this approval, I recommend that this resolution be forwarded to the next meeting of Town Council for ratification.
Thank you, Director. So we have a motion that CAC recommend approval to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to withdraw $5,833.68 from Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation to partially fund the budgeted 2021-22 projects as detailed in the attached report. If someone could move that, please. Councillor Maxwell, thank you. And Councillor Huntley, thank you for the second. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend approval to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to withdraw $5,833.68 from Town of Kentville Capital Reserve's general allocation to partially fund the budgeted 2021-22 projects as detailed in the attached report. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend approval to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to withdraw $5,833.68 from Town of Kentville Capital Reserve's general allocation to partially fund the budgeted 2021-2022 projects as detailed in the attached report. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you.
Next one. I have another request for withdrawal from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve. On July the 25th, 2016, the town entered into a cost-sharing agreement, which is agreement number 2016-004, with the Province of Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal regarding the street approaches at the new Kentville Bridge. The town and the province agreed to equally share the projected estimate of $170,000. The town had originally placed this matter in the 2017-18 capital budget, and because the bridge was delayed, it carried the amount forward in the years 1920 and also in 2021. The amount was removed from the 21-22 capital budget as it was felt the invoice would not be forwarded. However, on February the 15th, 2022, the town's engineer received the invoice related to the cost-shared project. The amount to expense is $88,642.67, and that's net of HST recoverable, and it requires funding from the town's capital reserve fund. And I should say that in the past, in all those budgets, the intention was to take the money from capital reserve. So we're looking at the town capital reserve general allocation containing $1,715,192, and after the above noted withdrawal, it will contain $1,626,549. So my recommendation reads that I recommend to Council Advisory Committee that the attached resolution be approved for withdrawal of $88,642.67 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve to satisfy agreement number 2016-004 between the Town of Kentville and the Province of Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal regarding the street approaches to the recently constructed Kentville Bridge. And after this approval, I recommend that it be placed on the docket of the next meeting of Town Council for ratification.
Thank you, Director. Our motion is that CAC recommend approval to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to withdraw $88,642.67 from Town of Kentville capital reserves to satisfy Province of Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal Agreement 2016-004 for street approaches to the Kentville Bridge. Someone could move that, please. Councillor Huntley, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend approval to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to withdraw $88,642.67 from Town of Kentville capital reserves to satisfy Province of Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal Agreement 2016-004 for street approaches to the Kentville Bridge. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend approval to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to withdraw $88,642.67 from Town of Kentville capital reserves to satisfy Province of Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal Agreement 2016-004 for street approaches to the Kentville Bridge. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and that motion is carried. Thank you. Director?
Thank you very much. My last request is a resolution for withdrawal from the Sanitary Sewer Area Service Depreciation Reserve. The 2021-22 Sanitary Service capital budget provides for partial funding of capital acquisitions from the Sanitary Sewer Depreciation Reserve, One project overran its budget and requires additional funding, and a second capital project overran its budget funded from another source and requires funding from the depreciation reserve. The details are as follows. And you can see the arena pumping station with what had a budget of $50,000 from the depreciation reserve. We've already drawn $50,000, but it's overrun by $968.38. The Burke subdivision sanitary sewer was budgeted from budgeted from borrowings, basically, and we have already drawn borrowings, but the borrowings limit was much less than what the actual figure was at the end of the year. So we're looking at a shortfall in this particular project of $43,796. Pardon me. Too many numbers. So we're looking for a total of $44,764.97. The town of Kentville sanitary sewer depreciation reserve contains $193,374 at this time, and after this withdrawal, it will contain $148,609. So I recommend to Council Advisory Committee that the attached resolution be approved for the withdrawal of $44,764.97 from the sanitary sewer area service depreciation reserve to partially fund the sanitary sewer area service capital acquisitions completed in 2021-22, and I recommend that it be placed on the docket of Town Council for ratification.
Thank you, Director. The motion that CAC recommend approval to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to withdraw $44,764 from the Town of Kentville sanitary sewer area service depreciation reserve to partially fund the budgeted capital acquisition completed in 2021-2022. Someone could move that, please? Deputy Mayor, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend approval to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to withdraw $44,764.97. Why didn't I say that the first time? So, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Huntley, I neglected the 97 cents. From Town of Kentville sanitary sewer area service depreciation reserve to partially fund the budgeted capital acquisition completed in 2021-2022. Is there any discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend approval to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to withdraw $44,764.97 from the Town of Kentville sanitary sewer area service depreciation reserve to partially fund the budgeted capital acquisitions completed in 2021-2022. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Director Kroll.
Thank you, Deb.
Some honey for your voice. And now, Director Gentleman, for our planning and development, please.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. This is an update for the month of from March. In that month, we had 8 permits issued for a building valuation of $575,000. And that brings us to a year total, which is a calendar year, of $10.6 million, just slightly over $10.6 million in development for the town. We have partnered with the province and County of Kings to undertake a municipal floodline mapping project, specifically the Gasborough primary watershed. I think it'll have more of an impact and relevance to the county, but certainly it will help us with our floodplain mapping and updates to the Cornwallis River. So there's no fee on our part, but we will be the lead group on that, and the project is funding the project in the tune of $180,000. The two of the bigger projects, Miners Landing and Ryan's Park, are moving ahead very well. The amendments that council approved to the land use bylaw to increase the maximum size of auxiliary dwellings in ADUs has been given second reading, was approved, and as of last week, there were no appeals submitted, so that is now an update to our bylaw. And we're working on and talking with a few different groups on some possible rezoning applications, which might actually turn into something more substantial than just a single rezoning. We're talking about different, because of the size of the properties, and the combination of those different properties may lead into something a little more substantial in terms of a secondary planning strategy or something to that point. So there's lots happening out there, folks. So that's the main points of my report.
Excellent, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the director? Councillor Gerard.
Thank you. Thank you, Bev. The first one, the municipal floodline mapping project. The province is funding it. Do we get some, since we're involved, do we get some of that money? What I mean is, you say that we're spearheading it, leading it?
Well, they need somebody from the municipal perspective to help kind of fund the, set up the committee, identify which consulting company was going to be used and help support, run the money through us to this consultant company that will be undertaking the mapping and the report. So we won't get any money, but we will certainly have the advantage of having updated and more relevant floodplain mapping for the town.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thanks, Bev, for your report. And I don't know if this question goes to you, but it's just something that I'm going to put out there to you and to Dave in planning.
Sure.
Okay? I had some residents approach me from Hillcrest subdivision.
Okay.
And they have a concern with the trucks going down to Hebrew Court.
Okay.
Okay? And they're going down Hillcrest Avenue, and there's a stop sign at the bottom, but a lot of times they're blowing through the
Just
stop
blowing
sign.
through.
And there are children on that
Okay.
Hillcrest Avenue road. And so they're concerned about the stop sign, they're concerned about the speed at which those trucks are going down there. And they're wondering, because that road is gonna be cut off eventually, if
Right.
those trucks can start coming in from Me Road instead of going down Hillcrest, so I'm just passing it along.
Okay, well, Dave, and the director, Bell and I can actually have that conversation, find out, because I know that the road will need to be built as well to our standards, so they won't be able to drive on the road until the road's actually built.
Right.
But for the construction of the buildings that they're putting in there, we can at least have a discussion, find out what can be done. Maybe there's another entrance that can be provided off of Me Road, and we'll certainly contact the developers.
Yeah, because there's several small children that are
Okay.
concerned about that.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Bev, just a question, and it might be was included in your report. A resident had mentioned to me about a new development in Forest Hill. Is that one of the ones that
Forest Hill,
Forest Hill Drive?
up here?
Yeah.
Never heard of anything.
Okay. Okay. I thought that might have been one of their.
No, it may have something to do with the LaPierre's.
Oh, I see.
On that property that they have there, but
Okay.
we have not met with them yet.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Are there any further questions for the director? Bev, I have one question. This floodline mapping job that they're going to do, are they going to marry it up with the 2010 report that we had on the town of Kentville?
I'm sure they will access all the information that we have and use that for their further investigation.
Okay, okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, Community Economic Development Coordinators are,
I think I'd say certainly a couple of words. I know that Lindsay right now is very active with Apple Blossom, trying to get everything kick-started again. So there's an extensive amount of work being done between the Apple Blossom Committee, Lindsay, Kentville Police, and so I know there's a lot of work and planning going on there. The Center Square, I know the leases with regards to Center Square have been signed down there. And there's an extensive amount of work right now just with regards to summer planning of various activities as we're trying to kickstart some things that maybe have not happened for the last couple of years, but that work, everybody's cautiously trying to get one foot in front of the other to hopefully get things going. So in general, I know that's what seems to be at this moment, really trying to get this summer off the ground.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Are there any direct questions with regards to the report that we've received from Lindsay? None? All right, let's move on then. And it's Parks and Recreation and Director Bedingfield.
Good evening, Council. Just quickly, you have my report in front of me, in front of you. There's a few things I just wanted to touch on. One is to officially welcome Craig Langell as our new manager of Parks and Recreation Facilities. We're very excited. I believe this is his third week. It feels like he's been here for 3 years already, so it's really great. He's fitting in nicely, and yeah, I encourage everyone to introduce themselves to him when you see him, either on the street or in Town Hall. In keeping in mind also, before Craig started with us, I relied heavily on our park staff. So I do really want to make sure that Rolling, Nick, Jerry, and Mike get a proper shout out to the amount of work that they did in helping me get through working 2 full-time jobs. It was great. They were lovely. So I want a big thanks to them. Just a note to folks under facilities as well, that staff are working continually to repair the trail damage that's come from flooding and just general winter weather. And so I just want to caution the public as they use our parks and facilities and trails and things like that, that is something to be aware of. So this time of year takes a little extra caution. That being said, staff are slowly shifting from the arena to the park, so you'll be seeing more and more of them as staff and summer staff start to come on. And then one note quickly from the Miners Marsh Advisory Committee, and we have put out a campaign about this, but that committee is asking for the public to refrain from using something called a callback, which essentially is to play bird calls to allow for really good photography opportunities or sightings, and that impacts their ability to nest and mate and all those great things. All these things we're learning. We have an amazing community that is much more educated than us. Didn't know that's not what I thought a callback was, but good to know. Programs and operations. Staff are being hired for the summer, left, right, and center. So the only opportunities I believe that are still open are for lifeguards. We're always looking for lifeguards, but we are slowly filling up, and the summer is shaping up to be pretty great. It'll be definitely our largest one since the pandemic started, which is great. For community outreach, we've been meeting regularly with our Canada Cup committee, planning for that event happening in August, and the Kentville Home Show is back. We're really excited for that. That's on April 23rd, 24th, and we encourage everyone to go and take a look. That event is one of our larger fundraisers to help keep the arena going and keep the cost down there, as a reminder. And just Ashley wanted me to remind everybody that this Thursday is Glow in the Dark Extravaganza. Okay. So for everyone to take a look, it'll be at Oakdean Park, and we're quite excited about it. It's one of her favorite events, so that's really exciting. Just under council priorities, I just wanted to touch base on the Accessibility Advisory Committee. That committee is meeting regularly, thanks to Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Savage for continuing to sit on that. It's a really great committee. We're doing some great work, including the task team, which is updating. I know that's something on top of everybody's mind, but they are working on the street naming bylaw, and that will be coming back sooner than later. The current draft is circulating right now, so I'm hoping that it comes back at the next council meeting. And the active transportation, Ahmed, who's been leading that, has pulled together the capital for 22-23, so you'll see that in Director Kroll's next report. And the regional recreation complex, I have here that there is no update on the next meeting, but in fact it's tomorrow. Just wanted to make sure that people are aware, and at that meeting we're going to be reviewing the results and have discussions based on the presentation that you folks received, and then the consulting firm will go back, do the final edits, and that document will be complete. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Director Bedingfield with regards to this report? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Director Bedingfield. I've already spoken to you about Miners Marsh and resurfacing, and I just want to give you the opportunity to talk to the public about that, because I know you've had some calls, and a lot of concern. And so if you could just take a minute just to talk to them about that resurfacing.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we have, and I mentioned this in my report too, that, for people to be cautious this time of year. Certainly there is, a certain amount of damage that happens on trails, as I mentioned. But it is certainly, especially around Miners Marsh, which is one of our trails that we advocate as being accessible. We don't have the staff over the winter months. We have half of a person in our parks over the winter months. With Jerry, otherwise that we don't have any park staff, and so slowly staff are coming back. So on one hand, the conversation is we need to be patient and have public education around the state of our trails. On the other hand, as a council, as a town, where is our standard in terms of accessibility? Is this something that's a priority? Do we need to have conversations around increasing staffing and our service to ensure that our trails are accessible to the standard that our community is currently asking us to be at. So that was my conversation at the accessibility committee, right? I mean, these are conversations as we move forward. Where is our standard in terms of accessibility? We have conversations at that table around what is feasible, but also at what point are we okay with excluding people, because that's what happens in these cases. They're hard, tricky conversations, but those will be the things that we have at that table and that our department has always, and we will continue to keep you folks updated and appreciate any feedback.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any further questions for the director? You're off the hook.
Thank you.
Chief, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I believe you have my reports that were submitted to the Police Commission Board as of February 2022, and they should be accurate of those dates. So as Director of Finance mentioned, we looked at a few areas in finance, maintenance for the building, maintenance for the vehicles, and overtime, and they're a little bit higher as a year every month. But all others appear to be within expectations, and we will be on budget 90.7% as of February 28th. So we're looking good there. No significant changes to the other account. From a bylaw and calls for service perspective, they remain consistent month to month. Nothing that's jumped up as a trend that I'm concerned about when it comes to calls for service. The only other thing really was Kentville Police, recipient of a grant for building vibrant communities, as was mentioned earlier. It's funded through Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, and we've posted for a position for a Community Crisis Navigator, and we hope to have somebody in May, and we're excited about that. And that's it for police, unless you have some questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chief. Are there any questions? Councillor York.
Thank you. Just looking at the overview of the report, the SOT tickets increased like 300% from 9 to 37. What's that about?
Yeah, so tickets are kind of sporadic.
Okay.
One of the things that's coming up in the next couple weeks, you'll see on Facebook, is a more directed approach towards ticket enforcement, in particular speeding.
Okay.
So what would happen is, if there's 2 people working versus others working and they're on calls, the tickets will go down. If there's more people working, the tickets will go up.
Gotcha.
So January, February, I found the months were fairly low compared to previous months, although they increased with SOTs. So it has to do sometimes with the people that are working versus the actual offenses.
Okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Chief. Just a question, or just maybe a little bit more explanation, and I know Director Kroll mentioned it as well, but about the new community policing officer. And can you just expand a little bit more about that?
So there's the request for the sergeant's position or the navigator position?
The navigator position.
So the navigator position, so what I've noticed, firstly in my frontline response last year, going to calls, and then when I read every call and talk to the supervisors this year, my role is that most of the calls we go to are not the traditional law enforcement, you're under arrest, go to court types of calls, which is consistent across most communities. It's about 80% are not traditional, someone's breaking a crime. Many times we encounter people, especially in Kentville, that are suffering from mental health, addictions, poverty, food insecurities, and generally in a crisis. So what I've also noticed from my work as the chief is there's a lot of groups in town that do a lot of good work. So you're talking about Open Arms, Chrysalis House, The Portal, Kings County Senior Safety. There's a number that always work on various groups and provide support to those groups. But one of the gaps I've noticed is we will go respond to a call for service, and we may go to the same person 5 times in a week who's in some sort of crisis. My goal is not to have those folks get charged with a crime and go to court. We're trying to divert them from court. So my hope with a navigator position is work with, certainly with police officers. Obviously, I've requested a sergeant's position, so they would work closely with that person if approved, is that they would review calls for service, sometimes attend on calls for service, and be able to take that long-term goal approach to work with that person to see what their needs are, and then put them in touch with various groups. I've received a lot of support already from Open Arms, Chrysalis House, and the Portal. This person would work with their staff on a consistent basis as needed and try to get the person the support they need and have a non-police officer traditional response to these more social justice issues. So the whole idea is to divert away from people getting charged with an offense just so you can stop them from that behavior and get them the supports they need, whether it's mental health treatment or addictions, or even just help them with a meal. So that's the kind of the Coles notes of it.
Thanks, well done, that's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell, did you have your light on?
I would, no, I was just gonna ask him to explain that position, but Deputy Mayor did it. so
Okay,
that's good.
perfect, perfect. Are there any further questions for the chief?
Thank you.
All good, thank you very much, Chief. All right, our next is Engineering Public Works and Director Bell. So before you start, you have to tell us how you did in your pickleball tournament.
How'd you know that?
You know, nothing happens in this place.
Well, we made it to the bronze medal game and lost in 3 games. But, you know, better than we thought we'd do. So it was a lot of fun. Easy now. A lot of fun. It's definitely become a passion for sure. A lot of fun. It gets me out probably 3 nights a week to get off the couch for sure.
Nice.
Thank you and good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'll start with the Kentville Water Commission. Just a brief update. March was a full meter read billing quarter for the Water Commission, and we will be presenting the Water Commission operating and capital budgets at the upcoming Water Commission meeting that's been moved now to April 27th. So we have a full report of this fiscal year that just closed. Sanitary sewer service, March was operationally uneventful for the sewer service. Everything is working as expected, and there'll also be a special sanitary sewer operating and capital budget at an upcoming future council meeting. Under Public Works, the crews are keeping busy with road and storm sewer maintenance this time of year. That's the current priorities for the crew. Spring tenders such as patch paving are being prepared now and will be posted in the coming days. With the confirmation of the Apple Blossom Festival back on, patching would start in the downtown core as soon as the plants open in late May, just in time, hopefully to get that patching done on that sort of that parade route area, and then move on from there to the rest of town. Under Traffic Authority, nothing new to report this month. Would like to welcome, we have a new, as Director Kroll mentioned in the operating budget, we have a new employee, a new custodian, Justin Garant, started last week. He'll make a great addition to our team, so I'd like to welcome Justin, who lives in town, by the way. Under projects, at the end of March, we submitted an application for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, known as the ICIP grant. If successful, this would help fund the underground infrastructure, the water, sewer, sanitary sewer, and storm sewer for the Donald D. Hiltz Connector Road, completion from Valley Waste to Prospect Avenue, as well as the replacement of our now at end-of-life water storage tank in the Kentville Business Park. The completion of the actual surface, the curb and the asphalt and the AT connector is not covered or eligible under this grant, but future grants may be available to assist with the completion of the road itself. So this grant, our estimate for the underground work was somewhere in the order of 9.7 million, of which, if successful, the federal portion would be 40%, the provincial 33 1/3, and our portion left would be the 26 2/3 to pay for. So, hopefully we're successful. It was considered a green environmental quality portion of the program that's ending, this ICIP. And again, they told us that certainly the road itself didn't qualify, but we're hoping they were successful with the grant for at least the pipe work and stormwater management portion to get that project going, which would certainly open up hundreds of acres of developable land and be a great commuter route from one end of town to the other. Design work is now well underway for this year's capital works projects. Myself and our project engineer, Ahmad, and with anticipation of council approval of those projects at our next special capital budget meeting. I do have a bit of an update, I guess, something we've been talking about now for, well, almost 2 years since the bridge opened. It will be 2 years this fall. But back and forth with Nova Scotia Power on the lights on either end of the bridge, and I do need to talk to the owners at the Family Tire side of the bridge. That's the only thing now that NS Power is waiting on, is just confirmation of where their signs to go back up that the province had to take down when they relocated the bridge, but they had, if you remember, a very large sign for Family Tire, and once that location is determined for sure, then that will confirm where NS Power can place some lighting on the approaches. It'll probably be on the north side. It'll be on the Family Tire side, some lighting there, and on the south side, it would be on the southeast side of the new bridge. So hopefully, we'll see some lights in the next few months. And I guess those are the highlights of my report.
Excellent, thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. Thanks, Director Bell. Just wondering how you're doing with that report on those high gates.
I've done a lot of research. Thank you, Councillor Zabian. I mentioned to CAO Troke with all the budget work and applications for grants, didn't have a chance to complete the note to council, but I'll have that certainly for the next CAC.
Okay.
Learned a lot, I must say. Learned a lot of the pros and cons and all that, but I'll leave that for May's CAC.
Okay, thank you.
Discussion. Thank you.
Are there any further questions for the director? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So you've seen a theme tonight around operational budgets. You've heard about capital budgets. There's been a lot of work. I personally want to thank everybody at the long table here for all of the efforts that they put in. And it's not just the numbers, but it's also the planning. The amount of work in the last few weeks alone, even around active transportation and so on, trying to maximize what we can do. And with the new addition of folks like Ahmad as a new employee has been greatly helping us speed along, making decisions, looking at multiple reports. And so very shortly will be a capital budget. We'll be coming forward to council and in excess of about a $4 million capital budget. The work around the ICIP application, as you heard Director Bell, was a $9.7 million estimate with additional pieces potentially on top of that. I would say that one of the things that I've noticed over the last 2 months in particular, as the weather slowly starts to change, is the inquiries around development in this community are very, very high. And whether it's folks who are just coming through trying to get acquainted, or folks already in the development community asking questions. And so the town is well positioned and the interest is there kind of around the growth that we've seen that continues. And you saw the number of permits that were issued just around planning for this year alone as it continues. So there's a lot of interest and a lot of attention being paid. And we're making sure that anybody who is interested in having a conversation around Kentville, that myself and the folks here at the long table are meeting all their requests and providing them with information. In addition, one of the other parts I just wanted to point out is we have started some work with, also, and I mentioned this, I think, in our last session, but Canoe Procurement Group, and about expanding our views beyond just looking at Nova Scotia provincial procurement. And part of that is accessing some of those larger procurement groups who have access to things as simple as pickup trucks, because it's almost one of those resources you just can't get your hands on here in Nova Scotia. So we're trying to open up more of those doors and give our directors more options when it comes to looking at whether buying, leasing, or what have you. And in order to try and move away from all the deferred maintenance costs that we see creeping up in order to replace vehicles when they're needed. So quick overview. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. Thanks, CAO. Just wondering, we met at the last CAC a month ago. You were going to try to find somebody to do the independent investigation, and I haven't heard much yet on that.
Thank you, Councillor Zabian, and Councillor, and you had even forwarded some names. So
Yeah.
I was able to complete my last interview with folks on Friday. And so where it was a request of council, I thought it probably appropriate to bring it back to council.
Okay.
I've had 9 separate conversations, and I have kind of a little bit of a matrix I'm going to bring in so that council can do that review.
Could I ask if it's possible, maybe you could send us like a bi-weekly update, and then we kind of be in the loop on those things? Because sometimes, you know, things, we have a discussion here and then a month goes by and then we may forget about it, or you may forget about it, one of us can, and then it's kind of, we lose hindsight of where we're going, so.
Sure.
Yeah,
Nope.
just a little, you know, update here and there, and then we kind of would have an
Yeah.
idea of where things are moving. Thank you.
Absolutely, Council,
Yeah,
no
I
problem at all.
appreciate it.
And I
Thank you.
guess on the other front, anybody, also feel free to reach out
Yeah.
at any point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any further questions for the CAO? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. CEO Trope, just wondering about the procurement process. Do you require like a sign off from the province to do that? Or to go outside the province to do it? Or,
So in this case here, what's happened is, this is a nonprofit procurement organization. And so they're working across all of the municipal units. You know, obviously our intent is to focus as much as possible on Atlantic Canada.
sure.
And so within Atlantic Canada, we've kind of got our own interprovincial procurement pieces we can work with. And so this is more about opening up some of those groups that would be supplying to all of the provinces. And we may only see the snapshot that they have in Nova Scotia. We may not be seeing the snapshot they have in New Brunswick or Newfoundland or whatever. So it's just opening up kind of the inventory a little bigger
Yeah.
than what we have right now. But you're absolutely right. There is one of those things if, for example, we all of a sudden said there's an organization in British Columbia, then we would need to make sure that we were on side with any kind
Right.
of purchasing requirements.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
There's no further questions. Thank you very much, CAO Trope. And that concludes our staff reports. They have been presented and are now part of the record of this meeting. So we move on to our unfinished business, and the first matter, or the only matter under this, is review of the noise bylaw. And CAO Trope, could you please provide council with an update on this matter?
Sure thing. So thank you, Mayor Snow. And first and foremost, what I'd like to point to is our brand-new project engineer. This was his first briefing note that he's ever written for a government entity. So, and as folks who maybe have not spent time in that world, it's always making sure you capture as much information as possible and put it forward. So at the March 11 CAC, there was a request for decision brought forward by Deputy Mayor Savage with regards to the potential change in the noise limits to the Kentville noise bylaw. And so as part of this process, there was a conversation had with a number of municipal units looking at what they do, how they measure it, the noise, and also kind of looking at some of the pitfalls and challenges as they have. So one of the things I'd like to point to is that, you know, when you look at kind of the experts or the world experts on this, and they talk about at what level do you need to have the appropriate noise level with background sound to be able to have a conversation. And 65 decibels is that kind of, there's more vocal effort needed to have a conversation, but certainly that's with a certain amount of background noise. And, you know, part of the rationale here is to look at how that would impact our just day-to-day lives if you thought about things that make noise in the community. And so when we look at objects like heat pumps, and generally heat pumps seem to run around 60 decibels, small air conditioning units that you see folks have in their window can run around 70 decibels. And, you know, basically things like, you know, traffic noise and so on, it's all very variable. The one thing in all this I can say that we certainly learned is that also in measuring noise, it's really important to be about 6 feet away from a hard surface, like either a house or something like a larger vehicle, because it can actually distort your noise reading by as much as 6 decibels. So you get a reverberation with our machine. And what you'll see, the machine that we're using is actually not just that it doesn't just detect, but it logs, allows you to create averages, but it also allows you to calibrate the device on a regular basis. And many of the other towns, when we talk to them, they actually have older style muffler readers that they're using to try and read the noise. So in this case here, what I would like to say to council is that, and I believe the question had come up last time around, we've had one noise bylaw complaint reviewed since council adopted the current bylaw. And the two things I would put forward, so one, and I have a recommendation here, but the status quo is always a reasonable thing if more investigation is needed. But if council is interested in making an adjustment to the daytime noise limit, the recommendation that we would make would be to move it from 90 to 80 and make sure that when measuring that we would always keep our measuring device 6 feet away from any large surfaces like a house. And so I know that's kind of machine gun with a few different pieces, and I'd be happy to do my best to answer any questions, or if there's more investigation, happy to take that away and bring it back to council.
Thank you, CAO. So we'll entertain questions before we move to motion. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. Thank you, CAO. I'm just wondering, I know Ahmed's not here to answer the question, but maybe you can. I know he compared a few other units there, like Woofle and Bridgewater, and just wondering where he got that number from and didn't marry up with the other ones. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the majority of what you see in other towns, quite frankly, in the conversations, there's historical pieces here at play, and we couldn't really say that's based on a specific reason. I can tell you that a few municipal units have that unique situation where they have an industrial or a commercial organization that's in a residential place. So thus they came up with how you measure as being very specific, so how many feet away, versus, you know, what the actual level was. So in this case, what happened was the work of both the World Health Organization, but also there's the acronym is ASHA, the American Speech and Hearing Association. They also have a lot of data. And so the two pieces was a balance between at 65, how many of the everyday things would we see that could become a concern versus trying to, if there was a concern that the existing level was too high, adjust it downward, see what that is for a period of time, and then look at it again after the fact.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any further? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, CAO Troke, for explaining that. That actually, Councillor Zabian's question was going to be one of my questions. So in terms of the piece around being 6 feet away from any surface, is that something that would be then incorporated into the bylaw? Okay, that would be. One of the other things, and I had mentioned this the last time that I brought this forward, and I think a couple of other councillors talked about it as well, was around the point of reception. And I know Digby has it in their noise bylaw. And our section of the bylaw, which is 3.11, where it talks about making any noise or combination of noises, which when measured on any property on which the noise is heard or the noises are heard, exceeds the applicable A-weighted continuous noise levels as follows. I would like to see at a point of reception there, put there. And whether the definition has to go at the beginning, which it probably would, like most of them under 2.0. And I have the definition, which you probably already know what it is anyway. So that would be one item. And I've done a lot of research on this as well since bringing it forward the last time and even before. I would feel more comfortable with it at 70. Most of the research that I did was under the WHO, where it talks about noise above 70 decibels over a prolonged period of time can damage your hearing quite extensively. So I'd kind of like to go middle of the road rather than it being at 80. I think I'd feel more comfortable at 70, but that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I've also done some research on this, and since the last time we talked about it. Most municipal units are at 65. You're saying it's, the rationale for that, for us going to 80 would be the device is that the rationale? Because I couldn't really figure out what the rationale was to mention that we had 65 in most units, municipal units, and 80 was being recommended for us. And just, what would be the rationale? Is it the device that's being used to measure, or what is that?
So I think twofold. First, when we asked most municipal units around the rationale of the 65, it seemed that there was a long historical number that was in place, and there was no real specifics, other than I do know very specific of one municipal unit, only because I work there. And it was very specific to that decibel in connection with the distance that you measure from something, and they had a 100-foot threshold. In the case here, we were looking at it both from a perspective of that we haven't received really any noise complaints here in the town of Kentville. In addition, that there's a lot of, one of the cautionary pieces I would say is that how many smaller devices exist here in the town that create noise, and I use air conditioning units as an example, because I know myself, and our device is very sensitive. I can tell you right now, I'm speaking above 65 decibels. And so it's one of those pieces that we felt that if there was a decision of council to adjust it downward, to take that step to see what would happen, and if there was a decision then going forward that there was a need to adjust it further, or if there was complaints or concerns. So it was kind of one of those, not unlike what the deputy mayor said, kind of a step towards something without saying we were going completely in one direction.
Okay, thank you. And what I noticed, what I found in the research, and mostly I looked at Canadian audibility numbers, and showed that 80 was in the higher range there. It would be things like alarm clocks, traffic, vacuums, and so on. And if we're looking at point of reception as being key, then that's kind of like if I'm out on my deck having a barbecue and you set a vacuum cleaner on my deck and run it the entire time that I'm having a barbecue. That would be pretty annoying at 80. And so, you know, I think our measurement needs to be from that point of reception, like right there where the person is complaining about. The Audibility Association said that 85 is considered damaging to human hearing, and we're setting a limit at just 80, which I find is a little bit concerning. And residential limits, according to that association, are usually set at 60 or 55 decibels, between 10 and 7. 65 daytime, 55 nighttime kind of thing. And so I wouldn't want to see us go much higher than a 65 or 70. I definitely would not want to see it up above 70. So that's kind of based on what I've been reading, and I definitely think that our bylaw needs to state from the point of reception. And there's probably exceptions to that perhaps could be listed. So if we're in in a non-power situation and somebody's running a generator, then, you know, I think maybe that's, might be an exception and so on, but, that's just kind of where I'm leaning right now, so, thank you.
Councillor York.
Sorry, thank you. Actually, you know what, I believe Councillor Maxwell covered what I was going to put in there quite nicely, so I'll leave it at that.
All
Thank you,
right.
Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. My initial question was gonna be, I just wanna confirm that point of reception means if I hear it in my kitchen, it's measured in my kitchen, not right next to the thing. The other question, I guess, would be, and maybe it's not an issue, but if we lower it from what's been recommended, is that gonna add to a whole longer list of exemptions that are everyday noises that occur in the community?
I think where it begins to open the door is a conversation around, do we treat Kentville as a whole? And the reason that I say that is a residential neighborhood the same as the industrial park, is the same as the downtown core. And so it does, and that's one of the things that when talking to other communities, if they had one or two industrial users and so on, there was not exceptions, but there was different mechanisms that would talk about how would you ask them to come back into compliance in the case they failed. So I think, you know, the reality is Kentville is going to get bigger, even with the addition of secondary suites. We're now going to have more people living in tighter spaces. So I think that and I believe where you're going with that question is that you necessarily wouldn't be treating a residential neighborhood the same as the industrial park if you're gonna have that conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there any other discussion? All right, I guess I will add. If we're going to be making any changes to this, I would say in the exemptions, we talk about noise being emitted by machinery or equipment used in snow removal and snow clearing operations. Perhaps we also need it for summertime lawn care. Because if we go to these levels, all of our lawn care machinery is going to be much higher. My other concern as well is the use of air conditioners, and if you think about, you know, the way houses are, and, you know, if someone had an air conditioner in a far side bedroom, and your house was next door, and, you know, we had the 24 feet between, you're gonna hear that air conditioner run, you know, during the day. So, does this mean that, you know, if somebody doesn't like your air conditioner running, they now get to tell you to shut your air conditioner off? I don't know, I just, I guess we worked hard on this noise bylaw. I think that we got a good product. We bought a piece of machinery to evaluate the sound, and we've had one complaint. And so I don't believe that we have a noise problem in the town of Kentville. And so my feeling would be the status quo of this, of course, with you know, with the exceptions as mentioned, and point of reception changes and those requests. But you know, I mean, we live in a very noisy world, and I think that there has to be some accommodation of that as well. And I don't mean to be putting up with noise that is continuous or is damaging. However, I think we have to learn how to live in this world that we have. So thank you. So based on our recommendation, we have two choices here. We can send this back to staff so that the CAO can embed the changes that you have requested here this evening and bring it back to us at another CAC. And I would call for consensus on that rather than putting a motion to send it back to CAO, if that works for everyone. You've captured everyone's comments, CAO, and Jennifer, you have them as well. So is that, does that work for you?
Sending them back to do what, sorry?
To embed
Okay.
the recommendations
Okay.
that have come from this, this discussion.
At the point of.
At the point of reception, there was, in the list of exceptions, so, chapter 5, or paragraph 5, it talks about snow clearing, but it doesn't talk about summertime stuff. And I mean, to me, that's as noisy as a snow blower. So,
Sorry, what number?
what number?
Yeah.
Paragraph 5, I don't care.
No, sorry, I mean at what number the decibel reading?
Oh,
Yeah.
so mine is status quo.
Okay,
I
okay.
didn't,
So what is he gonna bring, I'm confused what he's gonna bring back.
So if I could try.
Yeah.
certainly.
So what I have from a consensus perspective would be, make sure that we have at the point of reception as a measurement, make sure that it's 6 feet away from any building or hard surfaces when taking that measurement. Exceptions, so when you have power outage situation, things like generators, and the potential of considering, lawn equipment and so on in the summertime as being exempt. So those would be the things that I think I heard. The only thing I don't have consensus on is what would be the level at.
Right.
And so what we could do is bring that back, and then council could make a decision at that point on what they would like to be either status quo on the level or adjusted to whatever they would feel
Could we
appropriate.
not come up with a number now, is that, and then you could recommend, wouldn't that be easier? If everyone's,
Councillor Maxwell, your number,
7.
deputy?
70.
I'm status quo.
70.
Councillor Zabian?
I'm status quo, but if Dan's talking and he says he's over 65, me talking right now, I'm over 65. When this does come back from wherever, can Dan have the decibel meter so we sitting around, because I see if it's too low, then ticked off neighbors are gonna be going, I hear, and it's gonna be wasting a lot of people's time.
But that's where point of reception comes in,
right,
right? Because you can be talking out in your yard, and
That's
if
where it's
I'm in your apartment building, that's where, and it's bothering me, that's where the measurement's gonna be taken, right? It's not gonna be taken from you where you're talking.
No, absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. If Dan and I have houses next to each other, and he ticked me off a month ago, and he's out with his buddy sitting having a beer, and they're talking loud, and I go, you know what? Even if he's not, I can see that happening with such a low threshold.
Councillor Huntley?
Thank you. I'm wondering, with the 80, is that for us to probably be a learning? Once it goes down, maybe the 80 can, with all the additions that we go in, will the 80 give us some learnings from, okay, have we felt anything from 90 to 80? Just a question. It's,
So while it could be, I think the other side of this is that we haven't had any complaints,
yeah,
so.
yeah, and so there's no comparison, yeah.
Solicitor?
I just wanted to make a couple of comments, Your Worship. The first is that some of what's being discussed is already protected in the bylaw because, first, we have to remember this is about continuous noise. Okay? It's not the one-off yelling at your kids down the street to come home. So it's continuous noise, and the decibels only come in that it deems a certain continuous noise over that decibel reading to be an offense. So it has to be continuous in the opinion of the investigator. But it also deems a continuous noise of the operation of an internal combustion engine that's not muffled properly. So if it's muffled properly, it may well be over this decibel number that you choose, but it's not deemed by the bylaw to be an offense. It could be an offense, but it's not deemed to be an offense. And that's an important distinction. I also wanted to say that I think as part of any revamps of this bylaw, I'll want to have some discussions with the CAO, because how offenses are investigated isn't usually written out in detail in the bylaw. If they're not investigated properly, that's a defense to the offense that's been charged. And so some of that may or may not be appropriately inserted in the bylaw. But from what the CAO has said, I think it will be important to distinguish that 6 feet next to a large surface, because that's arguably a defense. If somebody says, well, hold on now, in that 6 foot area, it's amplified, and that's not my fault as the person making the noise, right? So if you wanted it measured in that space, it would be important to say it. If you didn't say it, I would suggest that it shouldn't be measured in that space, because it's not a true measurement of the noise created. So those are some of the things that need to be looked at from an enforcement perspective and a legal perspective within the bylaw. Ultimately, you have to decide, like I say, the only reason there's a decibel reading in there is for you to decide what the default is. If you're over that for a continuous period, then it is an offense. And when this number was chosen before, my recollection is that certain areas, for example, downtown, were of less concern because of the number. So out in the business park and at the west end by the business park in the commercial district, they're exempt. But downtown Kentville's not exempt. There are a list of other things, and I can tell you from living on Academy Street that when there's a ball game, those people close to the park, it's definitely over whatever number you choose for a continuous period of time, because I could tell you the score at the ball game and I lived on Academy Street. That's exempt. But keep those things in mind as you're having this discussion, because it perhaps gets a little challenging in the town of Kentville as to what noise is okay and what noise isn't okay. Those would be my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Solicitor. Councillor York.
Thank you. I just had some concerns as well about how open to interpretation continuous would be. And then if it's deemed by each different responding officer or whoever would be going up to make that, take that reading. If it's that widely open for interpretation, then perhaps it's a fault in how we've written it. And I would recommend maybe having the police chief take a look at it as well, if we're asking people to write a summary offense ticket.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, CAO, do you have enough information to take this back and consult with the solicitor so that we get this right this time?
I believe so.
Are we in agreement to bring it back at another CAC meeting? All right, all good, moving on. So that's by consensus, please. We have no correspondence this evening. However, we do have new business, and I see Director Gentleman getting up to the podium. So, Director Gentleman, we do have a request for rezoning in a C1 zone. Do you wish to brief council on this matter?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Yes, this is a very simple, straightforward rezoning application, I believe. The applicant is Sand and Sea Dive Shop for a land use bylaw amendment to rezone a property from general commercial to R2. The property is just west of Chester Avenue. It's the old Live store building. Certainly the house was built back in the early 50s as a residential use, but for the last number of years has had some commercial component on the bottom of the building. So just a general idea of what's the current uses and adjacent land uses and zones. The subject property is zone C1, general commercial. The building on this particular PID 5526044 was originally built as a single-family home. However, the ground floor area has been retail for the last several years. And while doing this particular rezoning application, we've also included the adjacent town park as part of the application as well. That's Zone C1. We wanted to include that within the rezoning from C1 to C2, or C1 to R2, just to alleviate the appearance of a spot zoning that we've had to deal with in the past on another application. So the subject properties are located on the eastern end of the C1 zone. The adjacent properties are zone C1 and R2, and is bound by residential buildings or residential dwellings, a church to the west, a town park to the east, and directly across Main Street was an old funeral home that has since been torn down and purchased by the Wedgwood House for Seniors. On that property, there's still the old garage that was left from the funeral home, and that's being rented by a construction company. The property has a future land use designation of commercial. To be able to consider a rezoning from commercial to a residential zone, the future land use designation in most cases must be residential. So the subject property is in a commercial designation. We want to change that. Generally, that would have to have a residential designation in order to consider rezoning from a commercial to a residential. However, if the property borders on two or more land uses or land use designations, council may consider a rezoning to the property if it's as if it were wholly contained within one of the other designations in accordance with section 15.6 of the municipal planning strategy. So essentially, in the MPS, and I included that language in that section of the planning strategy and part of the report. It's just, it abuts a residential designation, therefore this rezoning can go forward as if it was a regular rezoning application, and you don't have to change the land use designation from the MPS, which would require a concurrent plan amendment. So I hope that's clear to everybody. Okay. And I've just outlined that section of 15.6 of the municipal planning strategy that states that that type of application can be considered. So the proposal originally came in seeking the rezoning to allow for the property to revert back to a single-family home. The C1 zone does not allow for, it only allows for existing single-family and two-unit dwellings. And as a result, the property cannot revert back to a residential dwelling under the C1 zone. And I think as everybody has seen the property, it is more conducive to residential. The age of the dwelling is unknown, but the property is shown on the fire insurance map dating in 1951 as existing at the time. Sandency, Mike Huntley is seeking this amendment to sell the property as a single-family home. Though the property has had retail on the ground floor for several years, to use it for any other type of commercial use would require the building to be brought up to current building code, including making the space accessible and other upgrades depending on the use of the second floor. So you can see that it's not accessible. There's very little space to make it accessible without putting a ramp in either on the side or that one that would be used from the street frontage that would just essentially be out in the middle of the street. There are a number of steep slopes on the property, which also makes it very difficult to and very expensive to build. So it's almost 50% of the property has 25% or more slopes on it. And of course, these constraints limit the expansion of the structure for any other uses. So as I had mentioned earlier, as part of the review of this proposed amendment, staff acknowledges that the property is zone C1 and is bordered mainly by the C1 zone. But the nature of the uses are not commercial. The property to the east is a town-owned park. Both properties are zoned R2. Those are the east properties to the east. Staff initially had concerns at the perception of just rezoning this one lot in the middle of a commercial zone. There'd be a perception of a spot zoning. But I think this is a little different in nature than other ones that we've seen in the past. But because the last property in the C1 zone is a town-owned park, which are permitted within residential areas, actually any zone within the town, it just makes sense to clean this whole situation up and rezone that lot as well to R2. And then it, by doing so, also helps substantiates that section of the municipal planning strategy, section 15.6. So there is also, just for your information, the fact that policy IM4 of the municipal planning strategy does state that parks and open space are permitted within all zones within the town. So council, through its policy, IM 8 of the municipal planning strategy provides guidance for the rezoning request to ensure resulting development has a positive impact on the community. Of course, there's a whole section that we've gone through before with regards to the capacity of the schools and capacity of water and sewer and all those kinds of things that I didn't even have to touch on with this application, because the building's there, the use is clear of what it's going to be. All those review criteria items really are not necessary for this particular application, unless you want further information. So in summary, the request to rezone PIDs 5526-044 and 5524-6813 from general commercial C1 to 1 and 2 unit dwellings R2 is consistent with the policies of the municipal planning strategy. And so it's my recommendation that the application to rezone these two PIDs from commercial to R2 has been reviewed for compliance with the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw and other pertinent bylaws. That CAC recommend council give first reading of the request for these two lots to be rezoned from C1 to R2.
Thank you very much, Director Gentleman. So our motion would be that CAC recommend first reading to council at the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to request the rezone of PIDs 552-6044 and 552-46813 from general commercial C1 to 1 and 2 unit dwellings R2. Thank you. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Zabian. It has moved and seconded that CAC recommend first reading to council at the April 25th, 2022 council meeting of the request to rezone PIDs 552-6044 and 552-46813 from general commercial C1 to 1 and 2 unit dwellings R2. Is there any discussion on this matter? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Bev, just a question around, and I just didn't get it out of the synopsis that you did. It wouldn't be appropriate for it to go to R1, correct? It has to go to R2?
To R2.
Because of potential future use of the property?
No, I think because the adjacent residential zones that abut this property is R2.
Is R2. Yeah, okay.
And R2 is consistent with single-family homes and R2 homes, so
Yeah,
it just makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, that explains it. Thank you.
Are there any further questions for the director or any comments? Are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend first reading to council at the April 25th, 2022 council meeting of the request to rezone PIDs 552-6044 and 552-46813 from general commercial C1 to 1 and 2 unit dwellings R2. No? Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Just
Thank you, Director. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one other item. So I will do up the resolution for council. And I'm also going to make the recommendation that the public hearing be held in the afternoon or just before council in May. I don't anticipate, we've had these public hearings before council meeting. I think the simplicity of this particular application and straightforwardness of this one could easily warrant having that public hearing at that time. So just a
All right.
heads up for that.
Thank you, Director. So that will be, we will be holding a public hearing on May 30th. So that will be before our council meeting on May 30th. So if you can get that into your calendars, please. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next piece of business is Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Grant Resolution. And CAO Troke, did you want to update council any further on this matter?
Sure, thank you, Mayor Snow. So first, this is not looking to certify the resolution tonight. Obviously, the resolution would be going forward to council from CAC. As part of submitting our grant application, we did submit that on September 27th, council gave permission for staff to be able to submit for any grant application with regards to this. It came back that there's a very specific resolution that they use as part of the application process. The application process is closed, but they also accept that this can actually happen after the actual formal application has been in. So what you see before is the certified resolution that they would be asking for. And important to note, and just based on the conversation we had earlier tonight, that much of what we're talking here is about infrastructure. So already in our planning, we had a water tower and other things. That means that now, as opposed to that strictly being charged against the Water Commission, these are items now that we can actually apply the grant partially against. So overall, what we would be saying is that for a lot of this infrastructure, the town at this moment would be committing to approximately 26%. However, that is also funding that would be distributed between the town, sewer, water, and any other grants we would get. The ability to stack is something that you can do when applying for these. And so there's other federal infrastructure grants that we would be writing for as well as part of this process. So the resolution here is very prescriptive that we were given, and so that's what I'm just bringing to CAC tonight.
Thank you very much, CAO. So let's turn that into a motion that CAC recommend to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to approve the ICIP grant resolution for completion of the Donald Hiltz Connector Road Water, Storm, and Sanitary. Be it resolved that the town of Kentville submit project title Completion of the Donald Hiltz Connector Road for funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Green, Environmental Quality Stream, and be it further resolved that council support the project and commits to provide its share of $2,595,655 towards the $9,732,488 project cost. Crap, I still didn't get it worked out, so close. If someone could move that, please. Thank you, Councillor Huntley. And a seconder? Councillor Maxwell, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to approve the ICIP grant resolution for completion of the Donald Hiltz Connector Road, Water, Storm, and Sanitary. Be it resolved that the town of Kentville submit project title Completion of the Donald Hiltz Connector Road for funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Green, Environmental Quality Stream, and be it further resolved that council support the project and commits to provide its share of $2,595,655 towards the $9,732,488 project cost. Is there any discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion for CAC to recommend to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting to approve the ICIP grant resolution for completion of the Donald Hills Connector Road, water, storm, and sanitary. Be it resolved that the town of Kentville submit project titled Completion of the Donald Hills Connector Road for funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, GREEN, environmental quality stream, and be it further resolved that council support the project and commits to provide its share, $2,595,655 towards the $9,732,488 project cost. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and that motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, our next matter of business, we have a conflict of interest declared. Deputy Mayor Savage is leaving the chair, and the time is 8:40. CAO Troke, could you please update council on this matter before us?
Absolutely. So the owner of Video World had come in, we had a meeting, and you see a request before you where a lot was purchased in the park, the PID number is there, and the intent was to build an 8,000 square foot warehouse, which they would love to do. However, the pricing came in, and as folks know, the cost of materials are very high. So they've settled on a 5,000 square foot warehouse with a construction company, and they are asking, because in the purchase and sale agreement, it was specifically noted the size of the building that they wished to build. So therefore, any alteration to that was going to have to come back to council for council's approval. Their intent is that over the next 5 years, they are looking at potentially allocating where they're doing their business from to a single site. And so at which point then they would look to add a potential retail component onto this building. But at this moment in time, they're looking to, I don't think I put in there, they're looking to break ground in June with the construction of a 5,000 square foot warehouse. So they would need council's approval to make that alteration from the original 8,000 square feet to a 5,000 square foot warehouse.
Thank you, CAO, and that would become a motion that CAC recommend to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting approval of the request for revised building size from 8,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet. Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. Councillor Zabian? It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting approval of the request for a revised building size from 8,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet. Is there any discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion for CAC to recommend to the April 25th, 2022 council meeting approval of the request for a revised building size from 8,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. And Deputy Mayor returns to the chair at 8:43. Thank you. Do we have a report from Mentoring Plus?
I believe they circulated one late.
All
and
right,
so, yeah.
Jennifer is going to speak to that. There you go. Your mic is on.
It was sent to council during the meeting, so she was quite sick last week. So I'm not sure if you'd like to keep it on this agenda for discussion, or if you'd like to move it to the next meeting. That's up to you.
Is there an ask on it?
No, I haven't had a chance to look at it either,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, table. So next CAC?
Yeah.
Consensus? Thank you. All right, public comments. Members of the public are invited to speak to council on a matter that is currently before this council. Please provide your name and address. You will have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Mayor Snow, Deputy Mayor Savage, councillors. Good evening, all other staff. Sorry, Mayor Snow, I didn't hear how long you said I could speak.
3 minutes.
3 minutes? Okay, we'll try. So I'm here to talk on the noise bylaw, and this is my 4th spring that I'm in this chamber talking about this bylaw. We know that the article that was, the research that was done by Ahmed was very well done, very well researched. And I had to have a chuckle when I read that on Friday, when I looked at it, because everything he put in that article is what Corinne and my wife and I have already shared with these councillors for the last 2 or 3 years. It's exactly the same information. But today, I was pleased to hear that there was some agreement and that we're moving forward on something that is going to be acceptable. So we thank you for that. I also like to thank your legal counsel for pointing out when the discussion was going on that some of the key areas when you discuss decibel readings that are very important, that they need to be continuous and they also need to be interpreted properly at the property. And we are still in that position today. We know who number 1 is referred to in the document, which is us, but that's the wrong reason why you should be having a bylaw. I'm not representing us, I'm representing all the taxpayers in Kentville. You should be aware that they should have a good bylaw, that if something does need to be done, there is one in place. Having said that, I'd like to leave you and like to read this to you, because the bylaw and the noise that you always talk about is not just the actual noise, but it's the overall health of an individual. And I know some of you have mentioned it, and I also know that for the type of research that Corinne and I have done in the last 4 years, that when you go online or you talk to who or anything, it gets very, very confusing. It's hard for anybody to interpret it properly. So I will leave you with these closing remarks. Both the Center of Disease Control and WHO state that long-term exposure to 70 decibels or more can lead to hearing loss. Ahmed did not state in his report that there is more at stake than deafness. Noise buildup has a significant impact on all mental, physical well-being of humans and animals. Compared to other types of pollution, noise pollution is often overlooked as a health hazard. The World Health Organization released a new set of guidelines calling noise one of the top environmental hazards to both physical and mental health and well-being. You may think that 5 or 10 decibels is a small number, but in fact it's quite significant, because each time the sound increases by 10 decibels, the intensity increases 10 times, and its perceived loudness increases 2 times. Compared to other more moderate decibel levels, 80 is considered fairly loud. 70 is equal to a vacuum cleaner, 80 is equal to an alarm clock. But they only get used intermittently. The key again is continuous noise. Newer evidence by WHO confirms that health impacts that occur at levels between 40 and 60 outdoors, which is below the 70 decibel benchmark, WHO established new guidelines that 50 outdoors and daytime 40 for nighttime. Of course, 40 is difficult to achieve in urban areas. The benchmark is thus at 55 at nighttime, which this council has already agreed to, and I compliment you on that. Finally, the point of reception, as mentioned in your discussion earlier, and with Deputy Mayor Savage, needs to be clearly identified to ensure there is no misinterpretation by the bylaw ineffective and it's not enforceable. In other words, that it's not effective, but it is enforceable. We need a bylaw that is specific enough to make it enforceable, but at the same time, it has to be reasonable and not subject to interpretation. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your support.
Thank you. All right, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. The time is 8:50. Thank you very much. Good work tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Through both meetings.